Chapter 3395. Elder. Elder. Xiao Hua's voice is almost trembling. He stares at the old monk and says tentatively, I just came here to ask for directions. How did I become the future Buddha? Unfortunately, the old monk lowered his head again, turning a deaf ear to Xiao Hua's words as he continued sweeping the snow. How could Xiao Hua, who had already planned to leave, move again? He stood there quietly, staring at the old monk without blinking. His Buddhist sense had been fully released, covering the entire Xiao Linglong temple. His eyes were full of disbelief, and his heart was thumping wildly. He was thinking about the credibility of the old monk's words. Snowflakes were still falling, and there was no wind in the Xiao Linglong temple. The old monk had just swept 30% of the courtyard when Xiao Hua made up his mind. There were too many unimaginable things in this world. Zhu Xia's art of clairvoyance, the Shaman King's art of divine connection, and his hand of karma. Zhu Xia could predict that he would appear in Huan Kingdom, the Shaman King could predict that he would appear in Meng Mountains, and this senior of the Buddhist sect could predict that he would appear in this Xiao Linglong temple 90 years ago. It was nothing, and Xiao Hua chose to believe it. However, Xiao Hua was still puzzled. How could this old monk recognize him at a glance? Could it be that he knew that he would come today? Or did the senior of the Buddhist sect leave behind an image? If he knew that he would come today 90 years ago and left behind an image, would that senior know about his lost treasure in the Western Ocean? Or perhaps, if he had changed his appearance when he was forming his nascent soul in the void, would this old monk still be able to recognize him? Looking at the old monk sweeping the snow, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the seal of ocean-turning seal flew out of the void and rushed into the sky. Its bronze brilliance covered the entire Xiao Linglong temple tightly, and no more snowflakes would fall. The old monk naturally would not look up. He swept the snow in the yard with a broom and suddenly raised his head again. He did not care whether Xiao Hua was beside him or not. He opened his mouth and said, Putty, don't be surprised. When Master accepted this poor monk, he had already said that the mission of Shaolin Linglong Temple is to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord. If a disciple can't find another disciple in his life, then he will definitely be able to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord in his life. After saying this, the old monk swept the snow again until all the snow was piled up in the corner of the courtyard. Then, he trembled to the door of the main hall, carefully placed the broom next to the thick pillar, bent down with difficulty, and randomly chose a row of large vats. He removed the wooden lid on the vats, took out a small wooden spoon, scooped up the water in the vats, and drank 2 mouthfuls. He wiped the water stains on the corner of his mouth with his strange monk robe, and said, This poor monk has tried every means to accept a disciple in his life, but he has never accepted a disciple. Therefore, this poor monk knows that the glory of welcoming the future Buddha must fall on this poor monk. However, this poor monk still didn't expect that the Buddha would come so late. It's so late that this poor monk can't do anything for the Buddha. Elder. Xiao Hua walked in front of the old monk and asked with a smile, Elder, what's your Dharma name? Elder, why do you suddenly think that I'm the future Buddha? Could it be that no one has ever come to the Xiao Linglong temple? This poor monk's Dharma name? Don't mention it. This poor monk doesn't even remember what it's called. This time, the old monk really heard Xiao Hua's voice and replied, It's not that no one has ever come to my Xiao Linglong temple. Usually, there are monks who stay, and there are also devout benefactors. However, if it's someone like the Buddha who doesn't speak the language of my pure land, then there's not a single one. To be a disciple of my Xiao Linglong temple, being able to communicate with the Buddha is the most important thing. This poor monk often talks to himself when he has nothing to do, so he won't forget these words. Moreover, as he spoke, the old monk opened his mouth again, and actually used the language of the Dawn Rain continent to say, Could it be that the Buddha wants this poor monk to say these strange words? These words, this poor monk, can't say too much. Of course, the old monk's words were very jerky, and even some of his words were inaccurate, but Xiao Hua heard it clearly. This was the language of the Dawn Rain continent that he hadn't heard for a long time. Hiss. How is this possible? Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. His previous doubts were all gone. He had forgotten that the writing and language of the Pure Land and the hidden immortal continent were different. Just as he entered the temple, he spoke the language of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent to the old monk, and the old monk also responded accordingly. Now that he thought about it, just now, the old monk really seemed to be talking to himself. Now that the old monk actually spoke the language of the Dawn Rain continent, how could Xiao Hua not be surprised? What happened next was even more out of Xiao Hua's expectations. The old monk didn't bring him to the main hall of the temple, and didn't say much to him. Instead, he walked to a small house on the left side of the temple. Not long after, a burst of smoke floated out of the window of the small house, and then a kind of faint fragrance floated out from inside. Xiao Hua didn't follow. Now that he was surprised, he walked to the door of the small house, and stuck his head out to take a look. This small house looked like a kitchen. There were some neatly arranged firewood inside, and there was also a small stove. On top of the stove, there was a small iron pot. At this moment, something was cooking inside. That thing looked very viscous, and along with the fire, it rolled around with a gurgling sound. When the fire under the stove was gradually extinguished, the old monk took out a pot and 2 crude big bowls from the wooden cabinet next to the stove. Using his withered hand, which only had bones left, he picked up the small iron pot and poured the viscous liquid into the pot. Then, he took out several bottles and jars from the wooden cabinet, and took out some ordinary-looking ingredients and put them into the pot. The old monk picked up the pot, and slightly shook it a few times. Unexpectedly, some yellowish liquid was poured out from the pot. When the 2 big bowls were filled, the old monk carefully picked up a bowl and handed it to Xiao Hua, and said, "This is my Snowy Mountains special butter tea, try it." This thing was this poor monk's favorite 10 years ago. In recent years, in order to maintain this poor monk's body, I haven't used it for a long time. Since you've come today, this poor monk will also satisfy this craving. Xiao Hua smelled the aroma of the butter tea, and there was a strong meaty smell inside. He was quite unhappy in his heart, but when he heard the old monk's words, his heart was slightly sour. Respectfully taking the big bowl, Xiao Hua said, "This poor monk thanks Elder. Thank Elder for guarding this place for more than 90 years. Finished speaking, Xiao Hua raised the big bowl and drank the butter tea into his stomach. A warm feeling came from his stomach, and even more so from the bottom of his heart. The old monk naturally didn't have Xiao Hua's good appetite. He only drank half of it, but he couldn't drink any more. With a sigh, he put the big bowl on the stove, looked at it with some regret, and said with a bitter smile, after not drinking for so many years, "This poor monk is afraid that he can't drink anymore." Xiao Hua's eyebrows jumped, and he said with a smile, "If you didn't meet me, then it would have been fine. But since you let me come to Xiao Linglong Temple." At this point, Xiao Hua hurriedly shut his mouth. He didn't dare to say anything else. It seemed that before this, as long as he had the intention, there wouldn't be a good outcome for anyone who took the rejuvenation pill. And the old monk in front of him was already on the verge of death. Xiao Hua couldn't guarantee that his rejuvenation pill would be effective on him. The old monk didn't listen to Xiao Hua's words at all, nor did he look at Xiao Hua. He immediately said, "Buddha wants to thank a lot of people. This poor monk is only one of them. Xiao Linglong Temple has been built for 9,999 years. If we wait another 9 days, then it will be 10,000 years. This poor monk doesn't even know how many generations Xiao Linglong Temple has passed down. Only the Bodhi tree outside Xiao Linglong Temple was planted when Xiao Linglong Temple was built. It has witnessed the wind and frost of Xiao Linglong Temple for 10,000 years. Ah! Xiao Hua was shocked again. He looked left and right at the dark room. He really didn't expect that this ordinary temple, without any Buddhist formations or Buddhist lights, would have such a long history. "Buddha Lord, please follow this poor monk." The old monk didn't even lift his eyelids. He slowly walked out of the small hut and walked to the left side of the main hall. He pushed the door and the door opened with a click. There were more than 10 cabinets inside which were densely packed with scriptures. Behind these cabinets, there was a tall Buddhist shrine with many Buddhist archives placed inside. The old monk pointed and said, "This is my Xiao Linglong Temple's scripture pavilion. Buddha Lord, in the future, you must read the scriptures here word by word." In my Buddhist sect, although divine abilities are important, the Dharma is the most important. This. Xiao Hua wryly smiled and opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to answer. He really came to ask for directions and wanted to know where he wanted to go. He really didn't come to be the future Buddha Lord and didn't want to read any Buddhist scriptures in this Xiao Linglong temple. The old monk didn't wait for Xiao Hua to say more. He reached out and closed the door of the main hall. Then, he brought Xiao Hua to the right side of the main hall and pushed the door open. There was a thick pagoda in the main hall. This pagoda didn't have any Buddhist lights and even looked a bit rough and simple. Moreover, it looked very strange. Layers of railings and stairs were built outside of the pagoda. This is my Xiao Linglong Temple's pagoda. Since the establishment of Xiao Linglong Temple, all of the disciples' relics are here. After this poor monk passes away, a relic will be left behind. Buddha Lord can place this poor monk's relic on top of it and this pagoda will be complete. Every day, we will chant and pray for Buddha Lord's arrival. These relics are filled with our willpower. When Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, they will be of great use. The old monk's tone was as calm as water. He pointed at the pagoda and spoke in a very natural manner. It was as if these relics were the butter tea that Xiao Hua used earlier and not the true fruits that Buddhist disciples refined for dozens of years. I hope that everyone can read it for free. In addition, fellow Daoist Xian Qing has also written a book called Seeking Venerables in the Nine Heavens. Although it is just the beginning, I know that writing a book is not easy, so I hope everyone can support me. I thank everyone on behalf of fellow Daoist Xian Qing. -12. Chapter 3396. Xiao Hua smiled wryly. Back on the Dawn Rain continent, he had seen the visions of the Tusita heaven and the Kiliakasm of worlds, and knew that the exquisite Leaf Sutra was a technique cultivated by the future Buddhist Lord. But he had never considered becoming the future Buddhist Lord, nor could he ever have guessed that in the Great Snowy Mountain, in the exquisite Leaf Temple, there would be so many monks waiting for him to come. Not only would they pray to him every day, but they would also hand over their arus after they died. Xiao Hua was even more aware that although these relics all carried their own karma, they all had a common obsession. Therefore, if he wanted to achieve the Buddha fruit of the future Buddha Lord, swallowing these relics would definitely be beneficial to him and not harmful to him. However, could Xiao Hua swallow these sariras? The old monk seemed to have seen through Xiao Hua's thoughts. Of course, it was more likely that he had already prepared the wording, helping the Buddha Lord to achieve enlightenment is our obsession. Moreover, if the Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, the sariras will merge with the Buddha Lord. It will also be of great benefit to us. Buddha Lord doesn't need to think too much. Okay, Xiao Hua nodded, but he didn't make a decision in his heart. Seeing Xiao Hua nod, the old monk closed the door again. He walked to the front of the main hall and looked at the closed door. The future Buddha Lord hasn't come yet. The main hall of my exquisite temple doesn't worship incense. It only opens the door at the end of the year. Now that the Buddha Lord has finally come to the exquisite temple, it's the day when the main hall of my exquisite temple opens. From now on, all the tantric temples in the Pure Land can worship incense. Tantric. Xiao Hua was stunned. He thought of his Buddha seal catalogue. Wasn't that thing from Tantric? I'm afraid the Buddha Lord hasn't shaved his head, and he doesn't have a certificate or a Dharma name, right? The old monk looked at the closed door with some excitement and whispered something. Indeed. Xiao Hua didn't deny and replied. The Buddha Lord's Dharma name doesn't need to be based on seniority. The seniors of my exquisite temple said that the future Buddha Lord's Dharma name is what it is. The Buddha Lord's name is Body, so his Dharma name is Body. The old monk continued, however, this Dharma name is used before the Buddha Lord attains karma. After attaining karma, he can only be called Namo Dang Lai Shiametria. At this point, the old monk seemed to have thought of something. His walnut-like wrinkles rippled with joy. It's the fortune of my 9 lifetimes to be able to shave the future Buddha Lord's head and introduce him to Buddhism. I will definitely attain karma in my next life and become Namo Metria. Seeing the happiness on this old monk's face, Xiao Hua's heart gives birth to a kind of reverence. This was a joy that came from the bottom of his heart, a sublimation of his faith. Just like the Seven Sons Monastery's Dao Shan, when he saw the leftover porridge in his mouth fall into the mouths of the beggars, he would feel blessed. Every day, when he lit the incense on the wooden tablets in the main hall of the Seven Sons Monastery, he would feel that this was a sign of the Daoist sect. Shanzai, Amitabha. Xiao Hua felt the same in his heart and bowed. When the old monk heard Xiao Hua recite the name of Buddha, he felt comfortable no matter how he heard it. He stretched out his hand and was about to push open the door of the hall. However, just as his finger touched the door, he retracted it and very naturally patted his extremely wrinkled forehead. He seemed to be muttering to himself again, you see, this poor monk is really old. The Buddha Lord is going to shave his head today, so naturally he has to make some preparations. First of all, the worries of the mortal fetus on his head must be removed. Next, the Buddha Lord needs to bathe and change clothes. Elder. Xiao Hua smiled and said, this one, Buddha Lord. Unexpectedly, the old monk's ears were very sharp. Xiao Hua just opened his mouth and waved his hand, saying, the word this one is used by laymen to express humility. The Buddha Lord has not yet shaved his head, so he can call himself that. However, after shaving his head, he can no longer call himself that. This elder, this poor monk is also unworthy of this title. If you call me old monk, this poor monk is already very satisfied. However, all monks call themselves monks, poor monks, and so on. The Buddha Lord will definitely attain Buddha fruit in the future, so you can't be so humble. Calling yourself this one or just me is also good. Me? Xiao Hua was somewhat confused. Isn't this a common way of calling yourself? The old monk smiled and said, the Buddha Lord really hasn't shaved his head, so you don't know much about Buddhism. The Buddhist scriptures that my exquisite temple has collected over the generations, the Buddha Lord must consider every word carefully. Yes, this one knows. Xiao Hua readily accepted, unwilling to make this old monk unhappy. Hearing this, the old monk slightly nodded and pointed outside the temple, saying, let's go, Buddha Lord. This poor monk will take you to the warm water by the mountain stream to wash up. We'll talk while walking. Elder, don't leave the temple. Right now, the sky is filled with wind and snow, it's very inconvenient. Xiao Hua hurriedly said, Elder, you only need to tell me the location. Alas, fine. The old monk lowered his head and looked at his hands and feet, saying with a bitter smile, this poor monk's eyes are blurred, my hands and feet don't listen to my orders. To be able to see the Buddha Lord on the last day is already a blessing. To speak of serving the Buddha Lord, this poor monk's strength is truly beyond my reach. The more the old monk spoke, the more fluent the Tibetan Immortal Continent's language became. Many words popped out. It was clear that in these 90 years, he had put in a lot of effort in this aspect. Although the old monk didn't need to send Xiao Hua down, the old monk still insisted on sending him to the temple's entrance. He even said while walking, the Buddha said that the Immeasurable Life Sutra said, thus, the small kings scattered. Heard that the great king's wife had a wife. Came to congratulate her. Brought gold, silver, precious treasures, clothes, and the fragrance of flowers. Respectfully offered tribute and praised. Immeasurable wife. Raised hands to welcome. Didn't want to trouble. Since the wife. Heaven offers the taste of the masses. Nourishes the essence. Naturally full. Didn't serve the imperial chef. October was over. The crown prince was born. On the 7th of April. The wife went out. Past the refugee tree. Flowers bloomed. When the star came out. The wife climbed the branch. Fell to the ground from the right side. Walked 7 steps. Raised hands. Heaven and earth. Only I am honored. The 3 realms are suffering. I should be at ease. At the same time, heaven and earth moved. 3,000 great thousand karmic earth. All were enlightened. The 4 kings of Shafan. Along with the officials of the dragon ghosts and deities, Asaran, all came with guards. There were the Dragon King brothers. 1 Garuda. 2 Garudas. The left rain warm water. The right rain cold spring. Shafan Mo wrapped the heavenly clothes. Heavenly rain and the fragrance of flowers. Playing the zither and drum music. Burning incense. Pounding the fragrance of flowers. Voidside Fortress. The first Buddha of the Buddhist sect was born with the words "Only I am honored in heaven and earth." Although the Buddhist sect hasn't achieved fruition yet, and hasn't even shaved, the word "I" is worthy of it. The old monk recited the Buddhist sutra as if he was familiar with it. He even slowly explained it to Xiao Hua. Naturally, there was a lot of Sanskrit mixed in. Xiao Hua listened as if he didn't understand, but this "only I am honored in heaven and earth" was clearly heard. Good. Xiao Hua said with a smile. This seat understands. Many thanks for Elder's teachings. Namu Mettria Buddha tilde. At this point, the two also arrived outside the temple. Although the outside of the temple was completely different from the inside of the temple, the old monk didn't see it at all. He very naturally pointed to a place and said, 999 feet under the Bodhi tree, there is a pool bestowed by Buddha. My Xiao Ling Long temple's disciples all bathe and shave there. Yes, Elder, please return. After this seat has bathed, I will return to the temple. Xiao Hua followed the old monk's finger. His Buddhist awareness swept over and immediately saw the location of the pool. He hurriedly said to the old monk. The old monk's eyes were still turbid. He looked left and right, not knowing whether he saw Xiao Hua or not, but he said, "Yes, this poor monk will go prepare a monk robe for Buddha Lord. This item is also something my Xiao Ling Long temple has prepared. After Buddha Lord bathes, change clothes and shave." Then, when Xiao Hua heard about shave, his heart jumped. He hurriedly asked, "Elder, the Buddhist precepts, Buddha Lord, rest assured." The old monk had already prepared the words. His dry mouth cracked open and he said with a smile, "Buddha Lord came from afar. Naturally, you don't know the precepts of my tantric sect. My tantric sect is different from other sects. We don't prohibit meat and fish, marriage. Buddha Lord, rest assured. Tantric sect doesn't prohibit anything. Besides, you are the future Buddha Lord. Don't you have the final say in all the rules and prohibitions?" That's good. Xiao Hua was slightly relieved. He immediately thought of the butter tea the old monk just drank. There was a meat and fish taste in it. After speaking, Xiao Hua's feet produced auspicious clouds and he landed toward the pool. The old monk unexpectedly didn't know. He still said with a smile, "My tantric sect is a small branch of Buddhism. We only worship the future Buddha Lord. These precepts were set by Buddha Lord Tathagata. How can we follow them? I won't hide it from Buddha Lord." In the past, this poor monk also had a relationship with the secular world. It's just that it's been too long and there's no news about it. The old monk said a few more words. Seeing that no one answered, he knew that Xiao Hua had already left. He slowly turned around and walked toward the main hall of the temple. Just as the old monk was about to push open the door, his body suddenly leaned against the door. As the door opened, the old monk's body fell to the ground again. After half a meal's time, the old monk's body shook a few times. He then slowly climbed up from the ground. He turned his head left and right and sensed that he was in the main hall. A trace of tears slowly flowed down from his turbid eyes. He then walked to the only shabby praying mat in the main hall. He knelt down and kowtowed to the incense table. He whispered, "Namo Mettria Buddha, this disciple's life is coming to an end. Only a few people will know about this disciple's life. This disciple disdains others to know about this disciple. It's fine as long as Buddha Lord can see it clearly. This disciple shaved his head when he was young and has accompanied Buddha Lord for more than 90 years. Since Master returned to the West, this exquisite temple has been guarded by this disciple alone. After more than 60 years, this disciple has finally seen Buddha Lord's body in this life. This disciple's lifelong wish has been achieved. My exquisite temple's mission can be considered completed. This disciple knows that this disciple should be assisting Buddha Lord's body in reading Buddhist scriptures. In the end, this disciple will accompany Buddha Lord on his journey. But this disciple is unworthy. This disciple can no longer endure the laziness of this body. I don't want to stay in this world anymore. Namo Mettria Buddha, this disciple sincerely asks for Buddha Lord's forgiveness. This disciple sincerely asks Buddha Lord to take this disciple back to the Western paradise. -12. Chapter 3397. The old monk's words were close to Sanskrit. Not to mention Xiao Hua was not here. Even if Xiao Hua was here, he would not be able to hear it clearly. After the old monk kowtowed, he shakily walked out of the main hall and came to a small hut. The hut was very simple. There were only a few old wooden cabinets. The old monk fumbled around in the cabinets and took out a black wooden box. After opening it, there were more than 10 boxes inside. Most of these boxes were empty. Only the bottommost boxes had a few thumb-sized black beads. The old monk stretched out his shriveled finger and took out a black bead. He slowly put it in his mouth, but after hesitating for a moment, he put it back into the box. His turbid eyes seemed to be staring at a certain place in the air. After a moment of pause, he picked up the bead again. After a few times, the old monk finally put the bead back into the box. His mouth trembled as he whispered, "Namo Mettria Buddha," disciple asks Buddha for forgiveness. After saying that, he closed the wooden box and put it back into the wooden cabinet. Then he slowly walked out of the hut. Xiao Hua naturally did not know that Tantric Buddhism had always thrived in the snowy mountains. Their living environment was the most bitter and cold. In order to reproduce, in order to cultivate Buddhism, it was impossible for them to forbid meat and marriage. Xiao Hua wanted to refine Buddhism's cultivation method and become the future Buddha Lord. It seemed that only by shaving his head and becoming a monk could he truly learn the true essence of Buddhism. In this way, this Tantric Buddhism branch was suitable. Moreover, the exquisite leaf scripture was originally the cultivation method of the future Buddha Lord. This exquisite leaf temple had been waiting for Xiao Hua on this snowy mountain for tens of thousands of years. Everything seemed to be a matter of course. However, Xiao Hua, who was flying in the air, was actually moving very slowly. He could not help but think in his heart, "Ari, this Xiao, just came to ask for directions. Really, just to ask for directions. I don't have any other thoughts. How could I encounter such a strange thing?" Although Xiao Hua had already used divination to convince himself in his heart, when he thought about how he was about to become a monk and become the future Buddha Lord, which was more powerful than Guanyin Bodhisattva, he could not help but mutter in his heart. This exquisite leaf temple, it was actually built 10,000 years ago just to wait for this Xiao? 10,000 years ago, even I don't know where I was. Ayo, since this Buddhist sect senior from 10,000 years ago already knows of this Xiao, then, does the current Buddhist Lord also know of this Xiao? Besides, although I've been expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm still a genuine disciple of the Tao sect. What's the point of shaving my head? Even Frost Bamboo didn't really shave his head to become a monk, right? Xiao Hua had already thought of this before, but now, he couldn't help but think about it carefully. This was because the thought of running away in Xiao Hua's heart was growing stronger and stronger. If he wasn't soft-hearted and couldn't bear to see the old monk's sincerity, he would have already run away in a sorry state. The key point was that Xiao Hua didn't want to hurt the old monk's heart, and even more, he didn't want to fail to live up to the painstaking efforts and expectations of who knows how many generations of Xiao Linglong Temple's abbots over the past 10,000 years. Xiao Hua really wants to run away. The temptation of exquisite leaf temple is too great. Not only are there Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the Buddhist sect, there are also so many relics. If Xiao Hua has these things, the cultivation of the Buddhist sect will definitely skyrocket. However, although Xiao Hua is greedy, he still can't bear to blacken his heart to such an extent when it comes to the painstaking efforts of others over the past 10,000 years. He uses his own false thoughts to swindle others and swindle them to pretend to be some future Buddhist lord. Go. Or not go. Xiao Hua's heart was still wavering even when he flew above the hot spring. To go or not to go is really a difficult problem, making it hard for him to make a decision. The hot spring in front of him is several jong in size. It is on the side of the cliff between exquisite leaf temple and the foot of the mountain. The hot spring is filled with steam, melting all the snowflakes that originally fell into the hot spring into threads of water. The threads of water slowly fall down and merge into the unceasingly rolling water surface, disappearing in a moment. The water of the hot spring is azure. Between the rolling water, it is like a boiling crystal. Near the hot spring, there are many spiritual herbs, swaying under the steam of the hot spring. Further away from the hot spring, and several jong above the hot spring, there are piles of several feet of snow. The white of the snow and the blue of the hot spring complemented each other. It looks very pleasing to the eye, like a brilliant green bead inlaid in a white jade. Wonderful. Xiao Hua is vexed. Seeing such a refreshing scenery, he unconsciously claps his hands and praises. Then, looking at the clear hot spring, he really has the impulse to take a bath. Let's go and wash Tilda, perhaps my mind can calm down a bit. Xiao Hua's figure descended. Standing at the edge of the hot spring, he shook his head, as if he wants to shake off the depression in his heart. Roar! At this moment, a tiger's roar suddenly came from the distant mountain path. Then, a gust of wind blew, causing Xiao Hua to wrinkle his brows. When he raised his eyes to look, at the foothills of the mountain about several jong away, a white tiger of several feet in size stepped on the snow and rushed over. Wherever its 4 hooves passed, huge plum blossoms fell on the snow one after another. Chimpage. Seeing that it is just an ordinary white tiger and has not become a spirit, why would Xiao Hua be afraid? He also didn't release any pressure or Buddhist sense. He only stood there and coldly watched. Who would have thought that the white tiger would fiercely rush over? Its fierce and dignified tiger eyes swept over Xiao Hua. It only stared at him for a moment, then unexpectedly shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked to the other side of the hot spring. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed several stalks of spirit grass growing on the side of the hot spring. Then, it used its claws to wipe its big mouth. Like a cat, it rolled a few times on the other side of the hot spring. Then, it stuck out its tongue and licked a dozen or so drops of congealed hot spring water on the spirit grass on the left side. Then, it actually roared a few times at Xiao Hua. It cheerfully explored some kind of rhythmic pace and quickly walked away. Xiao Hua, who was standing at the edge of the hot spring, was somewhat stupefied. In his eyes, these ferocious beasts, which one of them wasn't vicious? Which one of them didn't pounce on a person when they saw him? Which one of them didn't want to feast on a cultivator's blood essence? This white tiger in front of him, could it be that its nature has changed? It doesn't eat meat anymore. It doesn't want to drink blood anymore. Paradise. Paradise. Suddenly, Xiao Hua was somewhat enlightened. A person's paradise naturally has no sorrows, no worries, and no worries about life and death. Although there might not be such an extreme paradise under the Buddhist sect, beasts don't eat humans, and humans don't eat meat. I'm afraid it's possible to achieve one or two. If the Buddhist sect really has such a great ability, then what can I do even if I shave? Xiao Hua had heard a lot of Daoist slander about the Buddhist sect on the Xiaoyu continent and the hidden immortal continent. He also saw the Confucian cultivators' disdain for the Buddhist sect, and even more so, he saw Frost Bamboo's cunning and Xing Chen's hypocrisy. He already had a prejudice against the Buddhist sect in his heart. Now that he suddenly saw the old monk's piety and the white tiger's obedience, he couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. He even had the thought of using other people's stones to polish jade. But when it came to the crucial moment, shave, there was still a knot in his heart. What he wanted was the Buddhist sect's cultivation method, not the Arhat's cultivation method. But if he didn't shave, he wouldn't be able to obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the exquisite temple. Of course, Xiao Hua could also obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques from other places, but hadn't the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques been waiting for him for 10,000 years? How could Xiao Hua not feel conflicted? Xiao Hua, who was struggling in his heart, took off his clothes and fell into the pool with a plop. The temperature of the pool was just right, and the depth of the pool was just right. Xiao Hua, who poked his head out of the pool, let out a long sigh. A kind of comfort that came from the surface of his body slowly seeped into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Along with this kind of comfort, Xiao Hua's soul felt like it was about to fly out. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the mist lingering in the air. Xiao Hua's mind was completely blank. This blankness only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's body shook. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened, and a light green brilliance appeared between his eyebrows. It instantly covered his entire body, and then rushed into the pool and into the stone wall of the snowy mountain. Xiao Hua's opened eyes gave birth to a kind of clarity. That clarity was like a clear mirror pouring water over Xiao Hua's heart. Not only did Xiao Hua's eyes seem to have torn away a thin layer of gauze, even his heart seemed to have torn away all the filth, and his heart became much brighter. What's going on? Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. This Xiao's Dao foundation hasn't stabilized yet. Could it be that it's the effect of forming a nascent soul? Xiao Hua, Xiao Hua. While he was puzzled, a faint voice sounded in his mind. This voice was filled with joy, and even carried a trace of trembling. Hearing it, Xiao Hua felt his heart tremble. Who is it? Xiao Hua was stunned. If it was Little Yellow or Little Black, they wouldn't call him. Moreover, they would only talk to him in his mind after entering the space. Little White. Xiao Hua even took a moment to wake up. After all, Little White almost never took the initiative to communicate with him. Today was the first time. Almost without thinking, Xiao Hua hurriedly rushed his mind to the mysterious dark clouds. At this time, the mysterious dark clouds were different from before. Now, not only were the heavenly marks and earth deeds deeply engraved on the surface of the mysterious dark clouds, the green aura entwining the heavenly might had become much denser. Above this green aura, there were many golden threads. These golden threads would overflow from time to time within the green aura, flickering with the intensity of the green aura as if they were breathing. In addition, the lightning between the heavenly marks and earth deeds had also become much thicker. Those broken threads were even more connected, strand after strand. Some were dense, some were thin, but each strand seemed to have endless power. Last time, Xiao Hua had already tested the powerful aura of the Great Desolate Era within these broken threads. Now that the broken threads were so complete, how could Xiao Hua dare to try again? Quickly come in, Little White urged again from within the mysterious dark clouds. Xiao Hua, who was standing outside of the mysterious dark clouds, could sense Little White's urgent breathing and dragon roar. -12. Chapter 3398. Jade Archive. Xiao Hua was even more surprised. If Xiao Bai's soul cultivation had improved, Xiao Bai would definitely not be so excited. There must be some kind of mutation in the ninth heaven of Lingyuan. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua flew into the mysterious dark clouds, the lightning on the surface of the dark clouds flashed, and the broken threads also swayed. The difference was that Xiao Hua deliberately avoided the aura of desolation, but it still uncontrollably attacked Jade Archive Xiao Hua. Of course, Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not care about these attacks at this time. His figure disappeared into the mysterious dark clouds. When he flew into the Yingsha sky, he saw that the whole Yingsha sky was brilliant. Thousands of green seal characters sometimes gathered and sometimes dissipated. When they dissipated, each green seal character was like a speck of particles. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning swayed between these particles. When they gathered, they emitted a power that shook the earth and mountains. The huge mountains and rivers were faintly discernible, just like a boundless world. Good Jade Archive Xiao Hua could not help but praise, looking up at the sky above the Yingsha sky. Previously, Xiao Bai had said that there was a seal on the upper level of the Yingsha sky, which made Xiao Hua depressed for a long time. Later, Xiao Bai said that he was wrong. Now, it seemed that Xiao Bai must have made a new discovery. When the Jade Archive Xiao Hua flew past the countless soul threads that resembled a jade green ocean, an incomparably huge dragon body was coiled in the sky above the jade green ocean. Above the jade green ocean, there was an enormous grayish-black dark cloud that was as heavy as a mountain. This dark cloud seemed to be connected to the surface of the mysterious dark cloud. There was lightning and broken threads. The only thing missing was the heavenly runes and earth deed of the heavenly might. These dark clouds were also like solidified waves. A terrifying aura was emitted from the inside. Even Jade Archive Xiao Hua could not help but feel a chill. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at the dark clouds with some surprise. This should be the fifth layer of the ninth heaven of Lingyuan, the channel formation sky. But why was this layer so different from the other 4 layers? Fellow Daoist, please follow me. The soul cultivator Xiao Hua appeared next to the Jade Archive Xiao Hua. After raising his hand in salute, he flew towards the dark clouds. Puzzled, Jade Archive Xiao Hua followed soul cultivator Xiao Hua into the sky. Before long, they had reached the edge of the dark cloud, where there was an enormous space. This space was grey and misty, and strands of dark green light wandered beneath soul cultivator Xiao Hua's feet. Large green seal characters were constantly bursting out from within the light. Oh! This is the same as the previous 4th heaven. Jade Archive Xiao Hua seemed to have understood something. He nodded and said, Fellow Daoist, what you mean is that outside these dark clouds is the condensed meridian sky. Then what are these dark clouds? Even as he spoke, Whitey's enormous draconic body flew over. Green light flashed around its body, and a Xiao Hua that looked exactly like the soul cultivator Xiao Hua appeared in front of him. You! Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. It seemed that Whitey had never transformed into his original appearance. How could it do so today? Jade Archive Xiao Hua couldn't help but cry out, how can you transform into I's appearance? You're a soul. Not an ordinary body. Heh. Xiao Hua's smile was far more brilliant than the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's. Proud and excited, he shouted, Xiao Hua. Of course this poor Daoist knows that. Not only are people's souls different, but it's also impossible for 2 identical souls to exist in this world. Furthermore, this poor Daoist isn't a human, and his soul is even more different from a human's. There's no way this poor Daoist can take on a human form that looks exactly like you, but I can transform into you now. Also, look at him. Doesn't he look a little different from before? With that, Whitey pointed at soul cultivator Xiao Hua. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua's gaze fell on soul cultivator Xiao Hua's face, soul cultivator Xiao Hua's rigid face suddenly blinked at Whitey, and then the corner of his mouth slightly rose, unexpectedly smiling. Ah! Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. Smiling bitterly, he cupped his hands towards soul cultivator Xiao Hua and said, Congratulations, fellow Daoist. Now you're even more like I, fellow Daoist. What kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Why are you still hiding it from I? Heh. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua laughed and said to Whitey, This is all thanks to fellow Daoist. You should ask him. Hurry up and transform back. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at Whitey, who was winking at him, and helplessly scolded, You are you, I am me. Is it fun for you to transform into my appearance? Ha, yes, it's fun. Little white Xiao Hua laughed heartily. He pulled Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand and said, Come with me, I'll show you something interesting. After transforming into Xiao Hua, Whitey's personality seemed to have changed. He was much more quick-witted than before, which made Jade Archive Xiao Hua quite happy. The 3 identical Xiao Huas flew over the mountain-like dark clouds and arrived at a very ordinary place. Whitey smiled and said, Xiao Hua, take a look. What's different about this place? Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked left and right, but couldn't see anything different. Shaking his head, he said, I can't see anything different. Haha, I knew it. He definitely can't see it. Whitey laughed and clapped his hands, looking at soul cultivator Xiao Hua. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said unhappily, If I can't see it, he can't see it either. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and a strand of soul flew out of his mouth. Whoosh! A dark green light flashed, and a dozen or so strands of soul came out of the dark cloud. Xiao Hua, come with this poor Daoist and take a look. Whitey rushed over and landed right in the middle of the soul strands. Its entire body once again transformed into its dragon form. As soon as the soul strands were retracted, Whitey immediately disappeared into the dark clouds. The lightning and the broken strands did not stop it. Oh! Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at soul cultivator Xiao Hua and asked, Can it be that we can only enter through these soul threads? Are the other places the same? Soul cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. That's right. Whitey has been hovering under the dark clouds for many days, and only then did he discover the secret inside. You'll know everything once you enter. Okay. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't ask any more questions. His body floated up and landed in the middle of the soul threads. The soul threads were like antennae, and Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately entered the dark clouds. The surface of the dark clouds was the same as the layers of the 9 heavens of spirit origin. They were all made of soul threads, but the soul threads here were somewhat black and mixed with lightning. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua passed through the surface of the dark clouds, his vision turned dark. This place was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. However, when Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked up again, there was a faint light of the moon and stars in the darkness. Borrowing this light, Jade Archive Xiao Hua saw that this was a curved space. "Xiao Hua, come up." Whitey's voice came from the top of the space. Jade Archive Xiao Hua obeyed and flew up. It was very strange. This space was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. One didn't need to rely on the depth of a soul cultivator to fly high. Moreover, as Xiao Hua flew higher, the space around him became bigger and bigger. After flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua still couldn't see Whitey's figure. However, waves of coldness inexplicably emerged from the surroundings. This coldness was like a cold wind blowing on Jade Archive Xiao Hua's body, making his muscles and bones weak. Moreover, after flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt even more limp and numb, making Jade Archive Xiao Hua feel very uneasy. "How is it?" Whitey's dragon body appeared about 10 jong above Xiao Hua's head. "Do you feel like you're going to be blown away?" "Indeed." Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't hide it. "If I fly any higher, I won't be able to bear it. Look at that place again." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also flew up and pointed his finger at a distant place. In the night sky, which looked like the mouth of a well, there were 2 faint green lights. One was like a half moon, the other half was blocked by the edge of the night sky, and the other half was a complete star shape. Spirit Tilda looking at the moon shape in the distance, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt something and nodded. "This is the green seal character spirit." "That's also the green seal character spirit." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua didn't find it strange. He pointed at the green seal character that looked like a star and said, "This should also be one of the 9 heavens of spirit origin, but I don't know why it's so strange." "It's more than strange," Whitey hurriedly said, "it's simply strange." "Oh right, Xiao Hua, do you remember when I told you that your meridian condensing heaven might be sealed?" I naturally remember." Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. "At that time, I had a feeling of oppression, an intuition that I couldn't break through the barrier between the 2 heavens. But I could. I tested it a little with him and found that although there was an extremely oppressive feeling, the barrier between the 2 heavens could still be broken through. That's why I told you that I was wrong." "Indeed." Jade Archive Xiao Hua seemed to have understood what Whitey wanted to say and nodded with a smile. "But when I followed him to the meridian condensing heaven, there was this dark cloud above our heads. All the oppressive, dense, and sealed feeling from before came from this dark cloud." Whitey explained again, "I stayed here with him for a long time, but I couldn't find the secret inside. Therefore, he went to cultivate and comprehend the bone joints, and I searched here. I don't believe that there's something in this world that I don't know." Whitey's I was extremely similar to Xiao Hua's. Jade Archive Xiao Hua almost laughed out loud. "But, I searched for a long time, but I couldn't find it. But just a few days ago, the entire dark cloud suddenly boiled and swelled, and an extremely bright light of the stars and the moon came from the place where we came in." Little White said proudly, "As such, I hurriedly flew over and found that there was a crack there. Just as I arrived, the crack started to shrink, and by the time he arrived, the crack had already disappeared, and not a single hole could be seen. Fortunately, he could use the soul strands to guide the soul strands out, and when I touched those soul strands, my whole body immediately shrank and was pulled in. Hee. After I came in and was illuminated by the light of the stars and the moon, I could transform into your appearance." -12. Chapter 3399. I can also smile now. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also said with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned as he listened, then looked up at the 2 spirit characters in the sky. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Previously, I remembered that there was a saying of 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls in this world, but when it comes to soul cultivators, there are only 3 spiritual souls and 6 physical souls left. The 9 heavens of spirit origin has 9 layers, and this layer is probably the hidden layer, right? There are 2 spirit characters in this layer of heaven, which should be the 2 characters of yin and yang. It should be called the yin-yang spirit sky. This layer of heaven has stars all over the sky, so it's also very good to call it star splendor heaven. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua suggested again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't care about the name of this layer of heaven, but he asked curiously, however, within the 6 heavens of spirit soul, there are 50 green seal characters in each layer. Why is there only 1 in this layer of heaven? Could it be that this is one of the 12 missing green seal characters? Soul cultivator Xiao Hua also frowned. I'm afraid so. Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. This spirit character is not simple. When Little White arrived here, he could use his spirit to transform into a spirit soul, and fellow Daoist also has a spirit. As for just now, I also felt as if I was enlightened. The reason why my human race is the spirit of all living things is probably because of this double spirit sky, right? Extremely so. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile. Others who cultivate the 9 heavens of spirit origin can't see the situation of each layer of heaven, so they naturally can't sense this star splendor heaven. As for our opportunity, Little White really found this place based on his feelings. That's right, it's an opportunity. Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed. The vibration just now was probably because I advanced to the nascent soul stage and caused a phenomenon in the sky. This double spirit sky had its own changes, so Little White discovered something strange, right? This is Xiao Hua's opportunity, and also the opportunity of all fellow Taoist. At the same time, it's also I's opportunity. Little White said with a smile, when I flew in, there was a lot of heaven and earth spirit energy, abnormally abundant. Moreover, the starlight in this heaven and earth spirit energy was very bright, flashing like fluctuations. Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled and said, I formed the nascent soul in my lower dantian and attracted the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The double spirit sky should be able to sense it. However, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua said, that day in the void, there were only fluctuations. It was more like the fluctuations attracted the star power, which was why the heaven and earth spirit energy was produced in star splendor heaven, right? Left and right are the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. One of you is called the first stage of the spirit heaven, and the other is called the star splendor heaven. Don't you think it's boring? However, I feel that this place is different from the other heavens. Little White was disdainful of the disagreement between the two and grinned. The bottom of this place is extremely narrow, almost inaudible, and the top is extremely wide, like a tree root deeply rooted in the ground. How can you still call it heaven? Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua thought about the body tree next to the exquisite temple. Wasn't it made up of many branches twisted together? And how many roots had penetrated into the foothills? Thinking of this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said with a smile, if that's the case, why don't we call it spiritual root? No, it's too vulgar. It doesn't sound as good as star splendor heaven. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua immediately objected. Besides, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is much more than spiritual light. If you want to call it spiritual root, you have to call it spiritual root. Ayo Tilda hearing soul cultivator Xiao Hua mention the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly became happy again. He clapped his hands and said, what fellow Daoist said is right. Just as I advanced to the nascent soul stage, there was spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. In other words, I can rely on whether or not this place can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not others can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not they can cultivate my Dao sect's cultivation method. Fellow Daoist, if this place isn't called spiritual root, then what is it called? Forget it, do as you wish. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua couldn't stand Jade Archive Xiao Hua said, you have the final say. If you call it spiritual root, then it is spiritual root. If you call it spiritual aura heaven, then it is spiritual aura heaven. If you say you can judge whether or not a cultivator can cultivate, Then you can judge whether or not others can cultivate. It has nothing to do with I don't. Jade Archive Xiao Hua pulled Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and said, how does it have nothing to do with you? I am Xiao Hua, and you are also Xiao Hua. With me, Xiao Hua, in this world, who dares to bully and humiliate the Dao sect? You also have a part of the responsibility here. How about this? You carefully think about whether or not you can find a cultivation method to judge whether or not a mortal spiritual root can sense the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How about it? Here. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua was about to refuse, but looking at Jade Archive Xiao Hua's smile that wasn't a smile, he said very dejectedly, all right, since I's Soul Bridge and that green seal text called Cleansing Heaven and Washing Earth have already been practiced, I will help you take a look. Many thanks, fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua bowed and said, when I's nascent soul is formed, I will ask fellow Daoist to go out for a walk. This is what fellow Daoist said. I want to be the first to go out and take a look. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua unexpectedly laughed like a little fox. Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. Humph. Jade Archive Xiao Hua pretended to snort coldly. How effective is that green seal text of Cleansing Heaven and Washing Earth? I will let fellow Daoist know. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile, this green seal text is like lightning, thunder, clouds, and rain. It is precisely used to break all the talismans of soul cultivators in the world. If you practice it to a profound level, any kind of imprisonment, any kind of seal can be broken. Good. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face had a slight smile, and he said again, actually, the discovery of spiritual roots doesn't mean anything to you and me, but it has a great impact on the development of the world's Tao. Now that the spiritual aura of heaven and earth has changed greatly in the Dawn Rain continent, all the Tao of disciple selection is ineffective. If we can rely on this spiritual route to select a disciple, you and I will have done a great deed. Yes, I understand. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua seemed to have sensed Jade Archive Xiao Hua's displeasure, and he hurriedly said with a smile. Right now, we are only at the spiritual root, so what do the tree trunks, branches, and leaves look like? While Jade Archive Xiao Hua and Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua were talking, Little White was not interested. It just raised its head to look at the starry sky, looking at the two spirit characters, and muttered to itself, I really want to fly up and take a look. Little White, Jade Archive Xiao Hua said with a smile, since the spirit character is an incomplete green seal text, it must be hidden in a dangerous place. Right now, our cultivation is limited, and it is not enough to get close to the green seal text. In the future, when our cultivation deepens, we will definitely be able to go and take a look one day. Alas! Unexpectedly, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's comforting words did not make Little White smile, but instead made it sigh, I actually envy you humans. Just the soul alone contains such a great mystery. I really don't know how you humans obtained the favor of heaven and earth. And my soul doesn't seem to have such a mystery. Little White's sigh naturally made Jade Archive Xiao Hua think of the debate he had with Ao Shuai and Old Monster Ji Feng about who was the wisest of all living things. Whether it is a human, a demon, or even a spiritual flower or spiritual grass, they are all the heavenly bell. They all have their own value of existence, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is a spiritual object of heaven and earth, so why should we care about who is the wisest of all living things? Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only put it this way. Little White was not like Old Monster Ji Feng, so Xiao Hua could only compromise. Unexpectedly, Little White shook its head slightly and whispered, Xiao Hua, you are still wrong. I am wrong. Jade Archive Xiao Hua stared blankly, somewhat unable to understand Little White's words. Where did I go wrong? Little White shook its head again and said, I only envy the souls of the human race, envy that the human race has the heavenly bell. But this kind of envy is only envy, and it is limited to the soul. Compared to my demon race, the difference between the human race and my demon race is not just a little bit. To be honest, in my eyes, the human race can only rely on their spirituality to compete with my demon race. Everything else is useless. Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not expect Little White to be as arrogant as Old Monster Ji Feng and Ao Shuai. Its tone just now was just jealousy, not envy. He could not help but smile bitterly. My human race, are you still a human? Little White did not wait for Jade Archive Xiao Hua to finish speaking, and asked with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled even more bitterly. Last time when they surrounded the fire dragon's soul essence, Little White already knew too many of his secrets. If he really forced himself to say it, he really could not be considered a complete human. Actually, the most terrifying thing about the human race is their ability to reproduce. Little White looked at Jade Archive Xiao Hua, knowing that he had nothing to say, and continued, in my memory, when I first arrived at Yellow Flower Ridge, there were not many people nearby, but what happened later? Although the population of Yellow Flower Ridge had withered, how many people from the secular world would appear within a 1,000-li radius? In my demon race. Ouch, I seem to remember something. At this point, Little White's face changed slightly, and suddenly turned into a huge dragon rolling in the spiritual route, no longer paying attention to Jade Archive Xiao Hua. Fellow Daoist, there seems to be an old monk peeping at your bath outside. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua reminded with a smile, you'd better go out quickly, don't let your spring scenery be exposed. Alas Jade Archive Xiao Hua ignored Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's laughter and sighed, you should know the cause of this matter. This old monk wants I to shave my head and become a monk. Although his tantra does not prohibit meat and fish and marriage, I am still a Taoist disciple. How can I become a monk at will? Future Buddha, just listen to it, it's very arrogant. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua instigated, why don't we play with future Buddha's orthodoxy? Fellow Daoist, you now have so many fellow Taoists. Ouch, that's right. The Jade Archive Xiao Hua understood that Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's thoughts were exactly what he was thinking. However, because he was thinking too much, he didn't think of these details. This poor Daoist doesn't need to shave his head, but the Buddha's Sariya can shave it. That guy originally practiced Buddhism, he should be willing to shave his head, right? Farewell, fellow Daoist. Jade Archive Xiao Hua cupped his hands and retreated from the mysterious dark clouds. In front of him was the steaming hot spring in the snow. Xiao Hua was hesitating whether to escape or not, but he found the mystery of the spiritual route in the mysterious dark clouds, which delayed him. Now that the old monk of Exquisite Temple chased after him, how could he still have the face to escape? However, with the Buddha's Sariya as a scapegoat, Xiao Hua did not mind becoming a monk once. -12. Chapter 3400. Looking at the old monk who was holding a strange yellow monk robe, Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. Just now, he had been talking nonsense with Little White about the spirits of all living things. In fact, as a human, the most difficult thing for a demon to reach was the human heart. Only with a heart could one be benevolent, righteous, and virtuous. Only then could one have no regrets for one's faith. This kind of human nature was something that demons would never understand. From the Exquisite Temple to this pool, Xiao Hua only needed to fly. However, Xiao Hua also knew that along the way, not to mention the slippery snow and rugged mountain roads, even with the old monk's turbid eyes, it was already extremely difficult for him to reach this pool from the Exquisite Temple. Not to mention, the old monk's clothes were already covered in snow. Xiao Hua didn't know how long he had been standing here. However, the old monk's arms were very calm as he held the robe. The yellow hat was placed on top of the robe, and a string of prayer beads was placed beside the hat. His eyes were calmly looking forward. They had already passed through the water vapor and landed outside the cliff. From those turbid eyes, Xiao Hua could see the old monk's conviction and persistence. Although Xiao Hua didn't say anything, he believed that Xiao Hua was bathing in the pool. Facing such a heavy trust, Xiao Hua felt a rare kind of nervousness. It was as if this was a kind of responsibility. This responsibility made Xiao Hua feel even more restrained and uneasy than when he faced the strange insect in the void. Elder, please wait a moment. I will come up right away. Xiao Hua muttered to himself for a moment. He used his hand to lift up the hot water in the pool and symbolically washed his body a few times. Buddhist Lord, don't be anxious. A smile flashed across the old monk's extremely old face. He said, Carefully bathing and washing away the dust in the body is also cleansing the mind. Using a pure mind is the foundation of Buddhism. Buddhist Lord spent so much effort and didn't slack off in the slightest. This is truly worthy of this poor monk's admiration. Sweat. A trace of shame appeared in Xiao Hua's heart. He originally wanted to get up, but now he could only be patient and properly wash his body. Although he didn't wash away any dirt, Xiao Hua felt that it was a blasphemy to the old monk's lofty faith. Looking at the monk robe in the old monk's hand, Xiao Hua waved his hand and the yellow monk robe flew into the air. After casually putting it on, it landed beside the old monk. This poor monk will help Buddha Lord change his clothes. The old monk felt the clothes in his hands fly away. After a while, he finally opened his mouth. Xiao Hua wanted to put on his own clothes, but this monk robe was different from a Daoist robe. It was even different from the monk robes Xiao Hua had seen before. It was very strange, so he didn't put on any pretense. He smiled and said, "Thank you, elder." When the old monk heard this, he beamed with joy. He looked at Xiao Hua with his eyes closed, and his hands trembled as he helped Xiao Hua put on his clothes. After half a meal's worth of time, Xiao Hua finally put on the monk's robe. When one of his arms came out of the monk's robe, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at the old monk who had also changed into a new monk's robe and asked, "Elder, you don't have to wear this monk's robe every day, right?" "Buddha Lord, don't worry. This is the Buddha Lord's formal robe. It can only be worn during my tantric sect's major celebrations. There's no need to wear it on ordinary days." The old monk smiled and said, "Moreover, my Xiao Linglong temple's lineage has always been small. When this poor monk passes away, there will only be one Buddha Lord. The Buddha Lord's status is honorable. Other than the current Buddha Lord, who else can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Buddha Lord in the past? If the Buddha Lord wants to wear it, he can wear it. No one can stop him. Hehe, that's really free and unfettered." Xiao Hua smiled. The old monk proudly said, "Of course, my tantric sect has always been an anomaly in the Buddhist sect. In the eyes of others, it is full of mystery. I understand." Xiao Hua smiled. It was funny but also a bit bitter. Just now, when the old monk was changing his clothes, he used his spiritual sense and true qi to check the old monk's meridians and body. He even used the Devil Realms technique to check his blood vessels. Just as the old monk said, the old monk was really at the end of his life. His meridians had long withered, the essence of his body was also dried up. His heart and blood vessels were abnormally old. Everything he did now was based on a kind of belief. The scene of the old monk lying on the ground was definitely not a coincidence. Facing such a body, even Xiao Hua's rejuvenation pill was powerless to bring him back to life. Alas, there is a limit to one's strength. It is indeed so. Perhaps only an immortal or a true Buddha Lord can let this old man live until tomorrow. Xiao Hua sighed. "Buddha Lord, please. This poor monk can finally shave the Buddha Lord's head." The old monk put his palms together and bowed in a very gratified manner. This is the most glorious moment of this poor monk's life. It is also the moment this poor monk has looked forward to for a lifetime. "Thank you for your trouble, elder." Xiao Hua used his monk robe to wrap the old monk. The two of them slowly flew up and flew towards Xiao Linglong Temple. Although Xiao Hua was afraid that the old monk would not be able to take it and flew extremely slowly, he still landed in front of Xiao Linglong Temple's main hall in a moment. Although the old monk could not see clearly, when his feet touched the ground, he felt the familiarity of the surroundings. He was not surprised and said with a smile, "Although Buddha Lord has not shaved his head, he actually has such divine ability. It is truly the fortune of my Tantric Buddhism sect. I do not dare. They are all insignificant Taos. Compared to Elder's cultivation, they are far inferior." Xiao Hua did not dare to be too arrogant in front of an old man like Dao Shan. He replied humbly, "This poor monk's cultivation has just begun. It cannot be compared to Buddha Lord who has already cultivated for several lifetimes. Even if Buddha Lord is a senior cultivator in this life and does not understand Buddhism, as long as he enters my Buddhism sect, he will be able to find the good karma and good karma of that day. All Buddhism sects' cultivation can be traced. The old monk's seemingly careless words immediately made Xiao Hua feel greatly alarmed in his heart. That's right. Buddhism sect emphasizes reincarnation and cultivation. This hidden immortal continent, this Xiao feels so familiar. Although I have not found Luzhin yet, I have not found Piaomiao sect, but perhaps, it is this Xiao's experience from my previous life. Xiao Hua's thoughts turned rapidly. Could it be that this Xiao is really, alas, there is always only one truth in this world. Although Xiao Hua is already a nascent soul master, he is still so insignificant under the heavenly Tao. He wants to find his own origin from the confusing world of the human world. All kinds of traces, 1,000 layers of fog, always make him unable to find the way back on the wrong path. I know. The old monk raised his hand and pushed open the door of the main hall. He did not ask about Xiao Hua's cultivation. He did not even care if Xiao Hua was a Confucian cultivator or a Daoist cultivator. Perhaps he already regarded Xiao Hua as a lay disciple of Buddhism sect. Buddha Lord, please. The old monk pushed open the door. He did not dare to take half a step forward and said very respectfully. Xiao Hua was also not polite and stepped into the main hall. However, he was also somewhat nervous in his heart. He did not know what was inside this main hall. Xiao Hua naturally did not enter the main hall of Buddhism sect. However, he saw many Buddhist shrines and Buddha statues in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Even in his memory, there was once a golden statue of Buddha. However, this Xiaoling Long temple was a branch of Tantric Buddhism. Moreover, it was built 10,000 years ago to wait for him, the so-called future Buddha Lord. How could Xiao Hua not be curious? The whole main hall was empty, but it was also abnormally clean. Xiao Hua raised his eyes and saw a 10-feet golden body. This golden body was abnormally fat, with a bare chest and a very warm smile on its face. What was special was that on both sides of its belly, which was bigger than 10 months of pregnancy, in its left hand was a small bag, and in its right hand was a thick prayer bead. Moreover, this golden body was casually lying there. It was not standing like an ordinary golden body of Buddha Lord. It was also not like when Xiao Hua first formed Buddha's sarira with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. This is the future Buddha Lord. Xiao Hua saw that the golden body of Buddha inside was not too different from what he had imagined. It was the same as what he had seen in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Unconsciously, his heart was slightly calmed, a kind of inexplicable calmness. In front of the golden body of Buddha, there was only an ordinary incense table. On it, 2 thick red candles were lit. In the middle of the red candles, there was a small fist-sized incense burner. On the incense burner, there were 9 red incense sticks, each as thick as a thumb. The incense burner was not big, so the 9 incense sticks had already completely filled the incense burner. At this time, it should be because the old monk had waited for Xiao Hua for too long, the incense sticks had almost burned to the end. In front of the incense table, there were 2 ordinary praying mats. Although they were somewhat old, one of them was particularly worn out. Before the praying mat, there was no Buddhist weapon such as a wooden fish. There was only a small box, half of which was covered by a bright yellow silk. When Xiao Hua stopped to look, the old monk had already shakily walked to the praying mat. He knelt on the praying mat, kowtowed, and recited, Namo Metria Buddha, disciple kowtows to Buddha. Disciple has waited under the green lamp for nearly 100 years. Now, I finally welcome Buddha Lord's flesh in this life. Disciple is fortunate to be able to shave Buddha Lord's flesh today. May Buddha Lord send down the auspiciousness of 100,000 worlds to bless Buddha Lord's flesh. Disciple is willing to use my broken body to help Buddha Lord cross the tribulation in this life. Immediately, the old monk respectfully kowtowed 9 times with his head on the ground. His mouth was also chanting, and at this time, Xiao Hua was once again bewildered. After a full half cup of tea's time, the 9 incense sticks finally burned to the end. The old monk raised his head, put his palms together and said, Namo Metria Buddha. Then, he lifted his hand and lifted the silk covering the small box. When he opened the box, there was a bronze mirror and a simple razor inside. The old monk invited the razor out with both hands. He turned around and coughed, Body, I am holding the blade for Buddha Lord today. Are you willing to abandon everything in the secular world and enter my Buddhist sect? Elder. Xiao Hua walked to the front. He didn't want to hide anything and said, although I cultivate Buddhist sect's exquisite leaf sutra, I was already a Tao sect disciple before practicing Buddhist sect's cultivation method. Moreover, my cultivation method is very complicated. If I say it, Elder may not believe me. Today, I came from hidden immortal continent, but I want to find a senior monk who knows the method of nirvana. I really came to Xiao Linglong Temple to ask for directions. I didn't expect there to be so many surprises waiting for me here. Elder, let me shave my head and respect me as the future Buddha Lord. I can accept it. But this shave matter, just now when I was bathing, I already thought it through. I have already cultivated Buddha's Sariya. Elder, can you let this Buddha's Sariya replace me to shave my head and become a monk? -12. Chapter 3401. Exquisite Leaf Scripture. When the old monk heard this, he couldn't help but be startled. The razor in his hand trembled even more. A series of words came out of his mouth that Xiao Hua didn't understand, the same tone as when he was praying. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Elder, I came from the hidden immortal continent, so I don't understand the language of the Pure Land world. Elder, if you have anything to say, please speak slowly. Namo Mettria Buddha. The old monk let out a long breath and respectfully asked, this poor monk is really overjoyed. I lost my calm for a moment and let Buddha Lord laugh at me. Although my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for the arrival of the Buddha Lord, and at the same time, we also prepared all the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist secret techniques for the Buddha Lord, and even offered sariras as offerings, but the exquisite leaf scripture that the Buddha Lord cultivates is not included. The name of this Buddhist scripture is not even recorded in the Buddhist scriptures of the Pure Land world. It is only passed down by word of mouth in my exquisite leaf temple. The Buddha Lord has 9 lifetimes of fate to be able to practice this Buddhist scripture, so naturally, he is indeed the Buddha Lord that my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for. The old monk paused for a moment and took a deep breath as if he was calming himself down. Then, he said, Buddha Lord, you have such an opportunity to cultivate Buddha's Sariya before shaving your head. But how can a Sariya shave your head? What? Buddha Sariras? Until now, the old monk was shocked as if he had just woken up from a dream. His shriveled lips trembled violently, and he could no longer hold the razor in his hand. He loosened his grip, and the razor fell to the ground. Xiao Hua raised his hand, and the razor floated up, flying back to the old monk's hand. Then, a string of words that Xiao Hua couldn't understand came out of the old monk's mouth. While speaking, the old monk knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed several times. Looking at the old monk's ecstatic appearance, Xiao Hua's heart was both proud and happy. He was willing to bring hope to the old man, no matter how big or small. Seeing that the incense on the incense table was about to go out, Xiao Hua hurriedly reminded, Elder, the 9 incense sticks in front of the Buddha are about to go out. It's fine. The old monk said in a relaxed manner, I was worried before the hot spring. I was even prepared to shave Lord Buddha's head before the candles went out. But now I have to shave Buddha's Sariya. Such earthly incense is no longer worthy. Let it burn out slowly. This is all Buddha's arrangement. As if he was afraid that Xiao Hua didn't understand, the old monk explained, the razors of the secular world, the incense sticks of the secular world, they are all used to shave the body of a mortal. To shave the body of a true Buddha's Ara, that is something that only the eminent monks who have saved the Buddha's fruit, and even our Buddha has the qualifications to do. The incense sticks are definitely the colored glaze fragrant oil of our Buddha's thunderclap temple, and the razors are also the severing mundane silk of our Buddha's thunderclap temple. Alas, this is all recorded in the Buddhist sect's ancient books. How many people are able to cultivate Buddha's Sariya? Since he had cultivated the Buddha's Sariya, how could he not have shaved his head? Compared to shaving one's body, shaving one's head for a Buddha's Sariya surpasses how much. Lord Buddha has already abandoned his body before entering our Buddhist sect. This is truly worthy of celebration. Hearing this, Xiao Hua really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was just being lazy and avoiding it, but it actually coincided with some of the Buddhist sect's secrets. He rubbed his nose. He really wanted to tell the old monk that whether it was shaving one's head with a Buddha's sarira or shaving one's body, they were both just shaving. Buddhism equalized all living things, so Buddha's sarira and the body should also be equal. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua couldn't say this to the old monk, who was a bit flustered. He could only wait until the old monk calmed down a bit. Or perhaps he wouldn't have the chance to say this to the old monk in this lifetime. This time it took longer than last time. Only then did the old monk's words become orderly. Lord Buddha, if that's the case, Lord Buddha's shave should actually be done in the Thunderclap Temple and personally presided over by the current Lord Buddha. Disciples' cultivation is shallow. If I were to shave Lord Buddha's head, I'm afraid I would provoke Lord Buddha's displeasure and affect Lord Buddha's cultivation. No matter, Xiao Hua said with a smile, I know the Thunderclap Temple, but the Thunderclap Temple doesn't know me. I want to go find Lord Buddha, but Lord Buddha doesn't want to find me. If I can't shave my head because of this and affect my cultivation, Elder, wouldn't Lord Buddha punish you even more? Hihi, Lord Buddha's words are reasonable. The old monk faintly smiled. My tantric sect, and the future Lord Buddha and the Thunderclap Temple are all Buddhist sect branches, but after all, forget it, Disciple won't say any more. Disciple is now bold enough to shave Lord Buddha's head. Disciple naturally received good karma because of this. It's extremely beneficial to Disciple's cultivation in the next life. Disciple thanks Lord Buddha for the gift. After saying that, the old monk respectfully bowed to Xiao Hua again. Xiao Hua smiled and raised his hand to help the old monk up, saying, Elder has been cultivating bitterly here for 100 years. Now is the time for this seat to repay you. This is what Elder should have received. If possible, this seat is willing to bring this honor to all the branches of Shaolin Temple. Disciple represents my Shaolin Temple to thank Lord Buddha for the gift. The old monk was overjoyed, trembling with joy. Originally, Disciple wanted to tell Lord Buddha clearly after Lord Buddha's head shave. Now that Lord Buddha has already refined Buddha's sarira, Lord Buddha only needs to use the sarira in the Buddha's head hall of my Shaolin Temple. That will be the glory of my Shaolin Temple. What? Xiao Hua was shocked, almost inconceivably saying, refining your sarira is a gift to you. Is this the glory you've been waiting for? That's right. It's exactly so. Lord Buddha only needs to integrate these sarira into Lord Buddha's sarira. That will be the greatest gift to us. The old monk was very sure, after Disciple shave Lord Buddha's head, Disciple will go to the west. Lord Buddha, please cremate Disciple's remains and use the sarira inside. Disciple can wait for Lord Buddha in this life, help Lord Buddha shave Lord Buddha's head, and then integrate the sarira with Lord Buddha's sarira. Lord Buddha's light will be able to refine Disciple's karma. Disciple will definitely be able to achieve Buddha's fruit with a karmic and unobstructed heart after reincarnation. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua somewhat understood, but he still hesitated. This seat has never read Buddhist scriptures. Previously, I have also seen the cultivation method of the great strength Vajra Dharma body. It is a selfish act of swallowing other people's sarira to strengthen oneself. Could it be that this seat's Buddha's sarira is different from this cruel cultivation method? Naturally, there is an essential difference. The old monk smiled and explained, Lord Buddha only needs to look at the Buddhist scriptures at the side of the main hall to know the specifics. The great strength Vajra Dharma body is to cultivate the position of our Buddhist protector. It only borrows the power of the sarira and does not eliminate the karma of the sarira. Disciple doesn't know how much Lord Buddha knows about our Buddhist sect's Buddha fruits. Jalan, Venerable, Heavenly King, Vajra, Arhat, Bodhisattva, and Buddha, these 7 kinds of Buddha fruits, except for Bodhisattva and Buddha, which can eliminate the sarira karma and use the supreme power of Buddha's light to help people cultivate in the next life. The other 5 kinds of Buddha fruits can only borrow power like the great strength Vajra Dharma fruit. Not necessarily. Xiao Hua's suspicion immediately arose again. He couldn't help but secretly criticize, sarira can help the cultivation of the golden body, this is known by all Buddhist experts. How many senior monks can cultivate Bodhisattva and Buddha? How many people can know the effect of this sarira? Eliminating the sarira karma and helping people cultivate in the next life. It may not be their words to scare people. However, seeing that this old monk was so pious, Xiao Hua didn't dare to say these words, especially to provoke him. Of course, Xiao Hua was only suspicious. He didn't study Buddhism and didn't have the secret technique to eliminate the sarira karma. The Buddhist sect is a cultivation path that is on par with the Taoist sect. Who can say that they don't have this kind of magical power to help people cultivate in the next life? While speaking, the old monk's figure swayed twice, as if he couldn't stand steadily. Elder. Xiao Hua hurriedly supported the old monk and called out. Disciple doesn't have much time left in the mortal world. Lord Buddha, please take pity on disciple and let disciple have the honor of shaving Lord Buddha's sarira into my tantra. The old monk hurriedly waved his hand, somewhat out of breath. Good Tilda seeing this, Xiao Hua knew that this was already the old monk's last wish. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and the sarira came out of his Niwan palace. When the 4-kai-long golden body held the clear water bottle and dressed in the 10,000 Buddha painting stepped into the air, Amitabha Buddha, Good Tilda he chanted the name of Buddha, his face solemn and benevolent. Rumble. The heaven and earth shook, and the wind and clouds changed color. Where the wind and clouds swayed, a fierce wind rose. Wherever the fierce wind passed, the snow that filled the sky was blown into the sky, and the layers of dark clouds in the sky were cut down layer by layer in this fierce wind. The wind grew stronger and stronger, and it was as if there were small holes in the air for thousands of miles around. The seemingly endless power of faith poured out from these small holes, like a waterfall falling from the sky. Tens of thousands of streams surged, and fell toward the inconspicuous little Linglong temple of the Great Snow Mountain. This is. The old monk was shocked again, because as the power of faith fell from the sky, heavenly flowers covered the entire snowy mountain. Fairies wearing flawless heavenly clothes sat cross-legged on the exquisite temple, either playing the pipa or softly singing. The sound of nature filled the entire main hall. One after another, powerful sky dragons roared and swam around the mini-exquisite temple. The effect of Nanwu Guanxian Bodhisattva in the longevity town was too shocking. Under the influence of the Buddhist sect's disciples, the worship of Guanxian spread uncontrollably throughout the entire hidden immortal continent. This pure power of faith should have slowly poured into Xiao Hua's Buddha relic, but because of the innate divine restriction, this power of faith was not collected by Xiao Hua in time, and had already condensed to a very terrifying degree. Now that the Buddha relic suddenly appeared in the Pure Land world, the power of faith naturally gathered together, and its momentum was naturally extraordinary, causing even more strange phenomena. Previously, when Xiao Hua took out the Buddha relic in the Black Cloud Ridge, the situation appeared like this. But fortunately, this was the Pure Land world, the Buddhist sect's mainland. Wherever the Buddha's light shone, there were many people who achieved the Buddha fruit, and this power of faith was indeed very eye-catching. The monks either knelt down to express their thanks, or rang the bell to celebrate, and no one came to disturb them. -12. Chapter 3402. Wu. Similar to the spirit tide, the power of faith gathered to a certain extent and immediately turned into threads of crystal-like objects. These threads of crystal-like light flashed and fell into Xiao Hua's Buddha sarira. Every time a thread of crystal-like light flashed, the Buddha sarira would slightly tremble. Moreover, as the crystal-like threads fell, the Buddha sarira's body flickered with golden light and actually broke through the 4 feet restriction. It gradually increased in height until it reached 5 feet before stopping. The strange thing was that as the Buddha sarira increased in height, the figures of the dancing fairies and roaring dragons from before actually gradually became blurry. When the Buddha's golden body reached 5 feet, it actually disappeared. Only the heavenly flowers were still fluttering around the snowy mountain. At this time, the strange phenomenon within the 10 million li radius had already converged to a 100 li radius. The dark clouds and snowflakes in the sky had all disappeared, revealing a bright sun. Perhaps because the snowy mountain was high enough, or perhaps because the sky here was pure enough, the sun was very dazzling. Under the sun, the pure crystal-like threads of crystal-like silver light swayed and fell like swimming fish. Wherever the crystal-like threads passed, gusts of wind were also produced. The sound of the wind never stopped, as if the world was singing. This disciple is very lucky. The old monk's eyes seemed to also brighten. He trembled as he walked in front of the Buddha Sarira and bowed to the sky. This disciple really didn't expect Buddha Lord's Buddha Sarira to already have a 5 feet golden body. Buddha Lord's enlightenment in this life will definitely come true. To be able to shave Buddha Lord's head and lead Buddha Lord into our Buddhist sect, this disciple is truly fortunate. Amitabha. The Buddha Sarira chanted. Although its appearance was exactly the same as Xiao Hua's, the benevolence and compassion on its face was not something Xiao Hua could have. The golden body of the Buddha Sarira descended and stood right in front of the old monk. The old monk extended his trembling right hand and landed on the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. He chanted, "People say that there are 3,000 worries, all of them are born from the heart and from the head. Cut off worries and let go of worries. Entering our Buddhist sect is joy. The body is an external object, only the body can enter the mortal world. The mortal world is like the sea, the body is the boat, the Buddha's heart is the helm, kindness is the shore. Cut off your worries and enter the sea of bitterness." Amitabha. As the old monk chanted, his hand landed on the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. Boom! With a loud sound, the Buddha Sarira's golden light brightened the old monk's turbid eyes. He seemed to see the golden body of the Buddha Sarira. At the moment when the old monk's hand was about to leave the Sarira's head, his middle finger slightly trembled as if it twitched, wanting to touch the top of the golden body again. Amitabha, Amitabha. Suddenly, the sound of Buddha chants resounded throughout the entire main hall of the little exquisite temple. The old monk's hand gently moved away from the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. He turned his head with difficulty and saw that behind the incense table, the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha was also shining brightly. The sound of chanting was coming from within the golden body. This golden light was like a sword and the chanting was like a bell. When it landed on the main hall, waves of blood-curdling screams rose one after another. At the same time, strands of black shadows also emerged from the left side. Within the shadows, the intertwining of the fairies and rakshasas were all destroyed by the golden light and the chanting. Ah! The old monk covered his chest with one hand. A black shadow also flew out from his body, turning into a black fog and disappearing in mid-air. The old monk's body fell to the ground of the main hall again, motionless. Amitabha. Xiao Hua was shocked at first, but then he had some understanding. He had experienced Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's enlightenment in the longevity town. He knew that the old monk was naturally still the old monk, but when he revealed the golden body of the Buddha Sarira, he had already attracted the heavenly demon. The old monk originally did not have any cultivation, so he was afraid that the heavenly demon had taken advantage of him in an instant. Just now, the heavenly demon probably wanted to have evil thoughts about him, but just happened to encounter the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha that was enshrined in the little exquisite temple, so it was defeated. Xiao Hua had some understanding, but Xiao Hua did not know. The Buddhism sect was not like the Daoist sect, and the old monk was not like Dao Shan. The Buddhism sect did not need to refine any Buddhism sect's cultivation method. As long as one chanted the Buddhist scriptures every day, even if one did not have the strength to truss a chicken in front of the heavenly demon, they would be comparable to a warrior wearing full armor. It was impossible for them to be used by ordinary heavenly demons. Although the old monk had one foot in the grave, his life of faith was steadfast, waiting for the Buddha Lord to come. To the heavenly demon, he was simply invulnerable. However, why was the heavenly demon able to take advantage of the old monk's weakness at the last moment of his life? This was not something that Xiao Hua could understand at this time, and what made Xiao Hua even more surprised was that when the old monk fell to the ground, a black shadow with a wisp of arrogant laughter flew out from the old monk's body. Finally, a voice with a hint of unwillingness and anger flew out from the old monk's body. Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. There is actually the cause of Namo Maitreya Buddha. This is really beyond my expectations. Damn it, this is all the old bald donkey's scheme. Today, I fell into your trap, so consider yourself Buddha is 1 foot higher. Maitreya Buddha, I will return. At that time, I will let you know what it means to be 10 feet higher than the devil. Hiss. Xiao Hua's corporeal body naturally didn't see this scene. His golden body, which was already 5 feet tall but was almost completely empty inside, had long seen this scene clearly. The primordial spirit inside the Buddha's relic instantly understood and almost sucked in a breath of cold air. Buddha and devil are indeed everywhere. If there's good, there's evil. If there's light, there's darkness. This heavenly devil is so formless that it actually sneaked into my corporeal body before I achieved enlightenment. It even subtly eroded my physical body under its influence. I understand now. That day in front of Zhai Xinglu, if the original body's temperament was like before, it may not have had a further conflict with Duanmu Qiu. In Seven Yang Temple, it may not have been so ruthless to the mortal world's constables. Even in Blackwind Ridge, it may not have killed the Bat King and the Bronze Pillar country's pursuers. All these subtle changes are all because of this heavenly demon. While the Buddha relic primordial spirit was pondering, the golden body of the Buddha above the exquisite temple shone even brighter, and the chanting became even louder. It was as if a golden sun was reflecting the white sun above their heads. The golden light rushed into the sun, and the remaining crystal threads and thousands of wild gales were attracted by the golden light. They rapidly descended, and together with the golden light, they all fell into the Buddha relic. Jia. The Buddha's Sariya shouted a mantra. A golden Jia word flew out from the Buddha's mouth and rushed into the air. It turned into a tiny golden thread and disappeared. Xiao Hua's Buddha's Sariya slightly opened its eyes. It could already see clearly that the golden thread went to the place where the power of faith came from. This Jia word was just like what the old monk said before. It was the Buddha's Sariya borrowing its own power of Buddhism, using the future Buddha Lord's merit to repay the faith of the masses and redeem the Buddha in the sea of suffering. Good Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. The mysteries of Buddhism are indeed extraordinary. I was a bit stingy before. Just as the golden body of the Buddha's light dissipated, an item that looked like a fallen leaf flew out from the Buddha's Sariya and floated in front of Xiao Hua's Buddha's Sariya. Good the Buddha's Sariya raised its hand and that item landed in its hand. It was a golden leaf. Needless to say, it should be one of the last 3 leaves of the exquisite Palette Sutra. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was really overjoyed. Ever since he obtained the exquisite Palette Sutra in the Imperial Thunder Sect, he had always wanted to make up for the leaves on the exquisite pagoda. Unfortunately, even in the ruins of Buddhism, the Buddha's light of the Maitreya Buddha's golden body could not make up for all the leaves. Since then, Xiao Hua had a premonition in his heart that in the Xiaoyu continent where Buddhism was destroyed, he was afraid that it would be impossible for him to make up for the exquisite Palette Sutra. Later on, Xiao Hua accidentally arrived at the hidden immortal continent. Xiao Hua's long-cherished wish once again had a chance to be realized. Of course, the hidden immortal continent was still extremely far away from the Western Paradise. Xiao Hua also did not have extravagant hopes that he would be able to obtain these last 3 leaves in a short period of time. Moreover, Xiao Hua's cultivation in Buddhism had been steadily increasing. Even in the Buddha's Sariya, there were still mysteries that he himself did not know and could not comprehend. Therefore, he was not particularly anxious. He just wanted to go to the Western Paradise when the miscellaneous matters in the hidden immortal continent were settled. First, he would deal with the matter of Jiang Liu's death, and then slowly look for clues about the leaves. Now, through the vein of space, Xiao Hua not only came to the Western Paradise, but also encountered the exquisite temple. This exquisite temple was waiting for his arrival. The leaves hidden in the golden body of the future Buddha of the exquisite temple were prepared for him. Wasn't this the legendary wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort? At this time, Xiao Hua no longer doubted his identity as the future Buddha. The Buddha's Sariya took the golden leaves and looked up at the clear sky outside the main hall. The sky was exceptionally blue. Looking from the main hall of the exquisite temple, it was particularly close. The Buddha's Sariya unconsciously sighed. Amitabha, every drink and every peck is predestined in the previous life. One cause and one effect, waiting for 10,000 years. With the help of the Buddhas, I will bear this kind of karma. I will use my karmic fire to refine the karma of the Buddhas and help the Buddhas achieve fruition. Before he could finish speaking, a myriad of Sanskrit chants resounded once again. The sound of copper bells also resounded, and they were struck a total of 81 times before they stopped. Come out! The Buddha Sarira waved its hand and the Linglong pagoda flew out from Xiao Hua's Niwen palace. The golden light flashed and landed on the main hall. That piece of leaf turned into a golden lotus and fell into the pagoda. Catcher! There was a light and crisp sound. It was the Linglong pagoda fusing into one. Come in! The Buddha's Sarira pointed his finger again, and the exquisite pagoda's Buddha's light shone on one side of the main hall. The thick wall immediately turned into nothingness, and all the Buddhist scriptures and golden leaves fell into the exquisite pagoda along with the Buddha's light. After collecting everything in the exquisite temple's sutra pavilion, the Buddha's Sarira looked to the other side, and that was the pagoda where the Sarira was placed. Now, the Buddha's Sarira had already built a 5-foot golden body, but the golden body was not full, and the lotus platform under his feet was still the 4th rank. The Sarira in the pagoda was indeed useful. However, after looking at the Buddha's Sarira for a moment, and then lowering his head to look at the old monk who was already completely lifeless, he was rather hesitant. To be honest, Xiao Hua did not have any special burden on the Sarira that did not have an owner. If he refined it, then he refined it. But these Sariras were the Sarira of the Buddhas who had been bitterly cultivating in the exquisite temple for 10,000 years, waiting for him. If he refined it, he could erase the karma of these Buddhas and help them achieve fruition. Naturally, Xiao Hua could refine it without any misgivings. But in the end, Xiao Hua did not receive the guidance of the Buddhist sect's senior monks. Now that the Buddha's Sarira had just shaved its head and became a monk, he really was not sure. -12. Chapter 3403. Forget it, this Xiao will take it first. Looking at the old monk lying on the ground with a serene face, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel heartache. This kind of thing had happened several times already, making him feel very uncomfortable. He always felt that in this world, good people rarely have good karma, and evil people live a long life. Army. In a trance, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation, and the bowl-sized golden character fell on the old monk's body. The golden light dispersed, but the old monk's soul didn't come out. The Buddhist 9 syllables incantation didn't have any effect on the old monk, which made Xiao Hua quite surprised. Lin. Immediately after, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation again, and as Xiao Hua expected, the old monk's soul still didn't come out. Alas, the old monk bitterly cultivated for a lifetime, but in the end, he was still delayed by this king. Xiao Hua sighed, feeling that because he became a devil, he was implicated, causing the old monk's soul to be unable to escape from the hands of the heavenly devil. It seems that if this old monk wants to reincarnate, this king will really have to use the secret technique of the tantric sect to refine the old monk's relic. But, how can I take out the old monk's relic? Moreover, if I want to walk in the Pure Land, it will be troublesome if I don't understand the language here. Let's see what is recorded in the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures first. The Buddha's relic waved its hand, and a Buddhist light shot out, and the pagoda in the main hall was also absorbed into the exquisite pagoda. After the exquisite pagoda and the Buddha's relic were absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, Xiao Hua looked at the old monk lying on the ground and was very puzzled. The old monk might not be able to live until tomorrow, but after all, there was a big difference between him and his death today. The old monk should have a lot of instructions for Xiao Hua. These instructions could only be taught after Xiao Hua shaved his head. Now that the old monk was gone, Xiao Hua was once again in the dark. However, Xiao Hua was already used to this kind of exploration. He very familiarly had the Buddha's relic take out the Buddhist scriptures that had just been absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, and he himself put the old monk's corpse into the small universe bag, and slowly walked out of the main hall. The seal of overturning the sea above the Xiao Linglong temple had already been withdrawn when Xiao Hua entered the main hall. Now, The bright and dazzling sunlight shone directly into the small courtyard. The sunlight was extremely bright. Although Xiao Hua was not afraid, he still naturally stretched out his hand and cupped it against his eyes. Just now, he had come in a hurry, and left in a hurry as well. He hadn't looked carefully. Now that Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the entire courtyard, he sighed even more. This Xiaoling Long Temple was even more austere than the Seven Yang Monastery or even the Jiangchao Monastery. It seemed that other than the remnants of a fire in the small hut, there were no other traces of people living here. Xiao Hua really didn't know how the old monk managed to survive here. After all, Xiao Hua didn't see any traces of Buddhist cultivation techniques on him. The sun was very bright. Standing under the sun, Xiao Hua didn't feel particularly hot. However, a very strange feeling came from Xiao Hua's skin. It was as if he was being roasted, and also as if the wind was blowing. However, there wasn't any wind at this time. The wind and snow from before had disappeared in an instant. 10,000 years ago, there was a senior from the Buddhist sect who set up this place, and even set up the Xiaoling Long Temple here. Could it be that they were waiting for me? Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't be as pious as the old monk. His thoughts were very simple. Looking at this simple and crude temple, he frowned and pondered. If that's the case, then this Xiao's life experience is naturally within this senior's calculations. Ayo, this Xiao has been too busy these past 10 days. I actually forgot. While thinking, Xiao Hua's mind immediately entered the space. He took out the map of the hidden immortal continent that he had obtained from the star-seizing tower. Without saying anything, he threw it to the green-robed Xiao Hua. The green-robed Xiao Hua continued to nag, but after being smashed by Xiao Hua, he immediately shut his mouth. He obediently took out the jade eyes and hastily checked it. Hey, it seems that the temptation is still very useful. Xiao Hua's mind withdrew from the space. He looked at the nascent soul sitting cross-legged in his lower dantian. He was very proud. This nascent soul was very popular at this time. Any primordial spirit that wanted to come out and take a look would use this nascent soul. Unfortunately, the nascent soul realm had not yet stabilized and the nascent soul's body had not yet completely solidified. Otherwise, several primordial spirits would have already started fighting. Of course, if the entire nascent soul was completely solidified, it would only become a late nascent soul realm cultivator. However, for Xiao Hua's nascent soul with the Tao of the Heavens as its foundation and the green-robed Xiao Hua's secret technique, several primordial spirits taking turns to control the early nascent soul to come out for a stroll, could not be considered a difficult matter, right? Xiao Hua's mind withdrew. Immediately, news came from the Buddha's Sariya. Xiao Hua slightly closed his eyes. Subsequently, he nodded and released his Buddhist sense. He found what he was looking for about 999 zhong to the west of the Xiaoling Long Temple. Xiao Hua was about to use the cloud riding technique. However, just as he was about to move, he stopped. He turned his head and looked at the small house where the old monk was eating butter tea. He quickly walked over and took out a large wooden board. He placed it in front of the main hall. Then, he took out the old monk's corpse from his small chenkuan bag and solemnly placed it on top of the wooden board. Along with Xiao Hua's recitation of the rebirth mantra, a strand of Buddhist light once again emerged from the golden Buddha statue and landed on the oil lamp. The worn-out oil lamp flashed with a trace of light, and a bean-sized flame appeared out of thin air from the oil lamp. Amitabha Buddha. Excellent, excellent. Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was constantly released. However, he still couldn't find out how this flame was born. Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. The Buddhist sect's methods were indeed subtle. Xiao Hua held the oil lamp in one hand. The flame of the oil lamp didn't seem inferior in the daytime. Xiao Hua's other hand was holding the wooden board. The old monk's corpse was peacefully lying on top of it. When the sun shone on his body, it was somewhat holy. Even his bitter chrysanthemum face reflected an indescribable smile. Xiao Hua left the Xiaoling Long Temple and walked towards the west side of the temple. The Xiaoling Long Temple was located on a huge mountain range. The Xiaoling Long Temple was located on the highest peak of the mountain range. Xiao Hua descended from the highest point of the Xiao Ling Long Temple. At this moment, he was walking along the mountain range of the Xiao Ling Long Temple. The path under Xiao Hua's feet couldn't be considered a mountain path. It was just some slightly chiseled stones. Moreover, these stones couldn't be seen clearly under the thick snow. However, the pious Xiao Hua stepped on the snow step by step. His feet emitted a zhi-zhi sound. This sound seemed to be the only sound between heaven and earth, causing Xiao Hua's heart to become increasingly calm. The further he walked, the stronger the wind above the mountain range. However, the flame of the oil lamp didn't seem to be affected at all. It didn't even sway. 999 zhong seemed to be very far, but after walking step by step, there would eventually be an end. At the end of the road was a small groove. Although there was some snow, under the mountain wind, the snow had already been blown thin, revealing the dark mountain rocks. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the dark mountain rocks were different from the color of the mountain rocks outside the groove. This darkness was in patches, clusters, and threads. It should have been caused by the fire. Xiao Hua's gaze fell on this place. His eyes revealed compassion. He already knew from the Xiaoling Long Temple's Buddhist scriptures that this groove was the place where the monks of the Xiaoling Long Temple were cremated. In the past 10,000 years, more than 1,000 Buddhist children had returned to the West. The Buddhist fire that burned their remains had burned the mountain rocks at the foot of the mountain into a black color. Xiao Hua respectfully walked in front of the groove. He carefully bent down and prepared to place the old monk's remains on top of the groove. At this moment, a rather indifferent Buddhist sense swept over from the distance. It was like a clear wave overflowing from the top of the Xiaoling Long Mountain. Oh! This Buddhist sense came abruptly. Xiao Hua didn't have time to change his clothes. However, he frowned. As his thoughts flashed, he immediately used the appearance-changing technique. A face with a small nose and small eyes appeared. It was precisely Zhong Xiaohua's appearance. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua's idea changed again. The small nose became tall and straight, and the small eyes became big and spirited. He changed into another appearance. After changing his appearance, Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry. He simply placed the old monk's remains in the groove, put his palms together, and looked into the distance. However, although Xiao Hua was standing still, the Buddha's relic in his Niwen palace was busy. Just now, the Buddha's relic had roughly read through the Buddhist scriptures. Originally, it didn't intend to look at the records of the Pure Land's language. Now that it saw that someone was coming, Xiao Hua could only let the Buddha's relic quickly flip through the records. Who would have thought that after the Ling Qi sky was broken through, Xiao Hua's intelligence had undergone an earth-shattering change. Previously, he had spent a lot of effort to master the language, but in the time it took to eat a meal, he had already made progress. Xiao Hua's heart was wild with joy, and at the same time, he became more and more stable. Just when Xiao Hua was reciting and familiarizing himself with the language of the Pure Land's world, he heard a very unfamiliar roar of a beast. In the distance, a cyan cloud floated over like a cyan lotus. Above the cloud was a cyan lion several zhong in size. This cyan lion looked a bit strange. From head to tail, it had a pure cyan manner without any impurities. Even under its feet, there were 4 rather large cyan lotuses. That cyan lion looked very fierce. Its eyes, which were bigger than a fist, were flashing with cyan brilliance. Looking at the cyan lion again, a boy wearing a monk's robe was sitting cross-legged. The boy's lips were red and his teeth were white. His face had a kind of otherworldly appearance. The top of his head wasn't bald, but was instead clustered into 5 buns. On each of the buns, there seemed to be a golden token engraved with the golden body of Buddha. The boy wasn't empty-handed. In his left hand, there was a cyan lotus. On the long stem, there was a bowl-sized lotus that was blooming vigorously. The boy's right hand was holding a cyan sword. The sword was plain, and there was nothing special about it. -12. Chapter 3404. The boy didn't come alone. About 10 zhong behind him, there was a strange bird flying. This bird was 3 zhong in size, and its two jonglong feathers were black and white. Even the waist and the roots of the wings were black, while the tips of the wings were pure white. What was special was that the bird's neck was very long, at least 5 kai long. This 5 kai long neck didn't have a single feather, and if one looked carefully, a faint bronze color could be seen from the depths of the neck. On the back of the bird stood a woman dressed in palace attire. This woman was in her 20s, and her appearance didn't seem to be particularly outstanding. She had large eyes, slightly coarse eyebrows, and seemed to have gone through a lot of hardships. Although her skin was extremely white, the hand holding the soft sword was very large. Even if there was a golden hairpin inserted into her cloud-like hair, it still wouldn't make people drool. Amitabha Buddha. The boy flew closer, and saw Xiao Hua waiting there with his palms together. He also chanted the name of Buddha. This poor monk is Ci Hui. How should I address you? This poor monk. TPU greets Great Master Ci Hui. When Xiao Hua heard that it was a monk of the Ci generation, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He hurriedly bowed and replied. Monk Ci Hui was surprised, and asked curiously, why are you called TPU? Although you are of the tantric lineage, shouldn't you also choose a Dharma name within my Buddhist lineage? Great Master. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This poor monk was previously a Buddhist layman disciple, and didn't shave his head and become a monk, so I don't have a real Dharma name. Today was supposed to be a good day for this poor monk to shave his head, but this elder suddenly died, and he didn't have time to give this poor monk a Dharma name. How is that possible? At this time, Ci Hui's azure lion had already set foot on the mountain range of the Great Snow Mountain. Ci Hui simply jumped down from the azure lion, and walked to the front of the old monk's corpse to take a look. He turned his head and asked Xiao Hua, since you are going to shave your head, naturally you should prepare a Dharma name before today, and fill it in the certificate, so that it can be sent to Lei-in Temple to report. How come you don't have a Dharma name when it's time to shave your head? This poor monk doesn't know either. Xiao Hua was still smiling. This poor monk did not come from the Great Snow Mountain. Today, I was just passing by the Great Snow Mountain and saw a small temple on the mountain. I wanted to come in and ask for directions, but who would have thought that this elder was already at the end of his life? In order to pass down the mantle of Tantra, this poor monk reluctantly shaved his head. In the end, before the shaving was complete, this elder had already passed away. Therefore, this poor monk still does not have a Dharma name. Immortal friend Ci Hui. At this moment, the woman riding the strange bird walked down from the sky and said with a smile, whether it is the courtesy name of my Confucian cultivator or your Buddhist sect's Dharma name, they are just symbols. Could it be that immortal friend wants to find a suitable Dharma name for immortal friend TPU? Amitabha, this poor monk is too obsessed. Hearing this, Ci Hui child immediately said with a smile, Ci Hui is T Hui, TPU is also T Hui. Many thanks for Nu Tanua's reminder. There are very few Tantra disciples in the first place. This small temple on the Great Snow Mountain is even more difficult to find disciples. That woman said with a smile. I'm afraid that this master was fancied by this old monk as soon as he came to the Great Snow Mountain and hurriedly tricked him into the temple. Amitabha, Nu Tanu is too serious. Ci Hui did not get angry and said with a smile, to enter my Buddhist sect, one must have good roots. Without several lifetimes of cultivation, it is simply impossible to enter my Buddhist sect. This monk must also have Buddhist fate. Today, he was able to shave his head and enter Tantra. Naturally, that woman was already used to Ci Hui's explanation. She said with a smile, you are the Buddhist sect's #1 strategist. Furthermore, you have the wisdom of 9 lifetimes. How can this little girl be your opponent? You can say whatever you want to say. Amitabha, Nu Tanu is too serious again. Ci Hui wanted to say something again, but thinking about the woman's judgment just now, she smiled slightly, shook her head and looked at the old monk's corpse. That woman looked at Xiao Hua with a smile and asked, little monk, let me ask you. Just now, when the Great Snow Mountain golden body appeared, did it have anything to do with you? This. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment. He originally wanted to deny it, but after thinking about it again, this snowy mountain was extremely cold and there were no temples nearby. Moreover, These two people must have sensed the strange phenomenon just now and rushed over. How could he easily deny it? Besides, now he had a completely different face. Even if he revealed his Taoist cultivation, so what? Yes, it was the strange phenomenon when this poor monk was shave. Xiao Hua simply admitted, "Who is Enyu Tanyu? Why don't you introduce yourself?" Unfortunately, that woman looked at Ci Hui with interest and did not answer Xiao Hua's question. "Oh, when you shave your head, you have hundreds of miles of psychokinesis on your body." Hearing this, Ci Hui faintly raised her eyebrows. Although it was a question, she was not particularly surprised. Hearing this, Xiao Hua was happy, but his face quickly changed into panic. He said in a low voice, "This poor monk does not know. This poor monk only knows that when I was shaved, there was a very strong wind. Even the hair this poor monk shaved was blown away." At that time, the old monk returned to the west. This poor monk was in a hurry and did not pay attention to the range of the psychokinesis. Amitabha, this monk really has a foundation. I don't know which senior brother's reincarnation you are. Ci Hui congratulated, but her eyes looked up and down at Xiao Hua and asked again, "This poor monk only knows that Tantric Buddhism disciples all wear saffron monk robes. This poor monk does not know why this monk is wearing saffron Daoist robes. How would I know?" Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said, "This is all this old monk's arrangement. If Grandmaster feels there is a problem, you can ask this old monk." "Ask." Ci Hui was very curious about Xiao Hua's rolling eyes and this question. It seemed to be different from the monks she usually saw. The woman at the side said in a timely manner, "Fellow Daoist Ci Hui, if fellow Daoist TPU said so, I'm afraid you have already lost, right? Fellow Daoist not only wants to go to that place with this little woman, but also wants to invite fellow Daoist TPU to go with you, right?" Hearing this, a trace of a bitter smile appeared on Ci Hui's face. She shook her head slightly and said, "Amitabha, this is all because this poor monk's cultivation is not enough. The little bit of desire to win in my heart cannot be erased. Now, I have fallen into Enyu Tanyu's trap." "Fellow Daoist, you can't say that," the woman said with a smile, "meeting is fate. If you should not go to that place, I'm afraid you would not have met this little woman today, right? Moreover, if you should not go to that place, why would you make this bet with this little woman in order to leave? Ari, I'm afraid this is the only way to put it." Ci Hui smiled bitterly again, "This poor monk lost my mind. I actually only remembered that condensing the golden body requires psychokinesis, but forgot that the reincarnated senior also has psychokinesis when shave." The woman said with a smile, "The conditions this little woman provided are also not bad. Could it be that you did not come for these conditions? Perhaps." Ci Hui declined to comment. She turned to Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Monk, this poor monk has a good thing here." When Xiao Hua heard the two of them talking about that place, he immediately lost interest. He had just formed his nascent soul and his Dao realm was not stable. He did not want to go to any dangerous place. What he wanted to do was to find a place to meditate. Moreover, the space meridian above the snowy mountain was unstable. If it was as Sun Jian said, he did not want to pass through the East Sea and South Sea, then he must hurry back to the Xiaoyu continent before the space meridian collapsed. Not going. Xiao Hua shook his head like a rattle drum. Without waiting for Ci Hui to finish speaking, he immediately shouted, "This poor monk still has other things to do. After the old monk's skin is melted and his sarira is taken out, this poor monk will quickly leave this place." "Leave this place?" The woman's smiling face showed astonishment. "Little master is already a monk in this temple. If he does not cultivate here, where else can he go?" Xiao Hua was speechless. He could not arrogantly say that this temple was built just to wait for him, right? He could not say that this temple had no meaning to exist when he came, right? Lazy little monk. Ci Hui smiled, "Your tantric sect is not prosperous. Now that you have just entered the tantric sect, your master has already returned to the west. Now you also want to abandon the temple and flee. This really makes this poor monk lament. Can't the cultivation of your previous lives make you wake up? Amitabha Buddha." Xiao Hua also smiled. With Buddha in my eyes, which part of the Pure Land is not Buddha? With Buddha in your body, which part of your every action is not cultivation? With Buddha in your heart, which part of the mountain and stone is not a temple? Why did Great Master not painstakingly guard the lamp in the temple and come to the snowy mountain to be carefree? When Xiao Hui heard this, her expression slightly changed. She hurriedly raised her hand and said, Amitabha Buddha, this poor monk was wrong. Although little monk has just shaved his head in this life, the root of wisdom of several lives is still there. This poor monk previously wanted to recommend little monk to other temples to cultivate. Now it seems that this was a big mistake. If Great Master is not wrong, then this poor monk is also not right. If there is right and wrong in your heart, how can it still be free of filth? Xiao Hua still answered with a smile, not bowing to salute. Xiao Hui's expression changed even more. He almost did not dare to believe his own ears. He lowered his head to look at the old monk on the wooden board, then raised his head to look at the calm and collected Xiao Hua. He took a few steps back, put his palms together and said in a low voice, Amitabha Buddha, this poor monk has really learned something. Seeing this young monk's astonished appearance, Xiao Hua was quite proud. He did not feel that he could reach the realm of a senior monk like Xiao Hui thought, but many times he could see through things with the eyes of a bystander and speak out like this. And it seemed that every time Xiao Hua spoke out, he had the posture of shocking the world with a single brilliant feat. This also showed that no matter if it was Buddhism or Taoism, when one cultivated to a high realm, they would achieve the same result through different means. Xiao Hui lowered her head. Xiao Hua was proud. The woman in the palace dress next to him pursed her lips and smiled. She could not help but say, fellow Daoist Xiao Hui, saying is one thing, doing is another. This snowy mountain is covered with snow all year round. If the sky could be as clear as today, the herdsmen of the snowy mountain would not have to live such bitter and cold lives. These words, you can say it, I can say it, anyone can say it, but who can do it? -12. Chapter 3405. Amitabha, fellow immortal has misunderstood this poor monk. Xiao Hui raised her head and looked at the woman. This poor monk is not stumped by this little monk's question. This poor monk is only thinking, this intelligent little monk, this Buddhist disciple of Tantric Buddhism with roots of wisdom, what should this poor monk do to guide him into the right path of Buddhist cultivation? Should this poor monk find an accomplished monk to teach him, or should this poor monk do it personally? Xiao Hua was shocked. His gaze swept over the young monk, and he asked indifferently, could it be that this poor monk is so mischievous in front of Master? Then this poor monk would like to ask Master, what is the right path and what is the wrong path? You have yet to attain fruition, so how do you know which path is the right path? Even if Master has attained fruition, is your path definitely the right path? Is your right path definitely this poor monk's right path? Is I sure to attain fruition just because I follow your path? Hearing this, Xiao Hui's face became even more bitter, as if she had a gold thread in her mouth. She lowered her head and chanted again, Amitabha, seeing this little monk today, this poor monk thinks of this poor monk's past. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, you don't know the vastness of the sea and sky, you don't know that there are many mysteries in this world that cannot be known by others. Humans are nothing more than dust in this world. What can cause clouds and rain with a flip of the hand, what can cause a dragon to fly in the sky with a flip of the hand, they are all absurd. Apart from arrogance, and contempt, what else can a human be? Only when one truly recognizes one's insignificance can one truly cultivate. The so-called cultivation is not how many Buddhist cultivation techniques one cultivates, or how many Buddhist secret techniques one cultivates, but how many Buddhist scriptures one reads, and how many good karma one bears. This poor monk even wants to say that the words in Buddhist scriptures can also kill, and only the spirit in Buddhist scriptures can let people live. In Xiao Hui's words, the first half made Xiao Hua sigh with emotion. It was exactly as he had thought, but the second half made Xiao Hua puzzled again. However, Xiao Hua could also see that Xiao Hui's words came from the bottom of her heart, and she did not hide anything. The first Buddhist expert that Xiao Hua met was Han Zhu. Hanju was a complete liar who tricked Xiao Hua miserably. Later on, Xiao Hua met a few more Buddhist disciples and none of them left a good impression on him. Therefore, even the old monk who had just passed away was unable to completely change Xiao Hua's bad impression of the Buddhist sect. And at this time, Xiao Hui had just met him, and she was actually thinking so much for him, and was even distressed for him. This made Xiao Hua's heart vigilant. He didn't know what kind of medicine Xiao Hui was selling in her gourd. If I can understand the spirit in the Buddhist scriptures, even if I throw the Buddhist scriptures to the back of my head, I can still attain the fruit. Xiao Hui obviously didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. She still said, if you can't understand this spirit, then you should properly study the Buddhist scriptures and truly understand Buddha's great wish. Purely showing off and arguing, purely speaking words, you can only walk into a dead end. It can't even be considered a wrong path. Grandmaster, you're overstating things, right? Xiao Hua's heart gave birth to a sense of victory as he said indifferently. Xiao Hui's face was still distressed. It seemed that every word Xiao Hua said made her heart ache. It was like a knife stabbing into her heart. Little monk, you don't need to say any more. This poor monk will ask you 3 questions. You see if they are correct or not. Xiao Hui asked very regretfully. Grandmaster, please speak. Xiao Hua nodded. He wanted to see what this young monk wanted to say. Your Buddhist cultivation technique has made quite a bit of progress. If this poor monk is not wrong, I'm afraid that you have already reached the Rugi realm. Correct, what Grandmaster said is correct. Xiao Hua slightly frowned. He didn't want to answer, but after thinking for a moment, he still answered honestly. You have studied very few Buddhist scriptures, so much so that this poor monk feels that you may not have even read a single one. Xiao Hua's eyebrows twitched. Before today, he indeed hadn't read a single Buddhist scripture, but in this short moment, he had already read half of the Buddhist scriptures in his Niwan palace. Xiao Hua looked at the woman who pursed her lips and smiled. He sighed and nodded. What Grandmaster said is correct. This is the 3rd question. Xiao Hui turned to look at the woman and said with a wry smile, this poor monk suspects that this little monk is not a Buddhist disciple of the Pure Land world. What? Xiao Hua was surprised and even more shocked. At the beginning, he spoke a bit slowly because he had adapted to the Pure Land world's language that was somewhat similar to the Sanskrit language. Now, he was already extremely proficient. He believed that it was impossible for others to see through his origin, but he didn't expect that Xiao Hui would still see through him. Therefore, Xiao Hua couldn't help but touch his nose and said with a wry smile, Grandmaster, what do you mean? Little monk. The woman smiled, as if she was playing a double act with Xiao Hui. Fellow Daoist Xiao Hui means, you are just a monk who has just shaved his head. Even if you haven't heard of fellow Daoist Xiao Hui's Buddhist name before, after all, he is a senior of the Xiao generation. Look at your appearance. What Grandmaster? Do Buddhist disciples call their seniors like that? Also, where did you get your tip for name? As far as I know, there is no such generation in the Pure Land world. When Xiao Hua heard this, he already had an idea in his heart. He said with a smile, didn't Grandmaster Xiao Hui say it just now? This poor monk has never read any Buddhist scriptures, and also doesn't know any Buddhist seniority. I had just shaved my head before the 2 of you came to the Great Snow Mountain. Grandmaster Xiao Hui looks so young, even younger than this poor monk. If it weren't for the 2 of you having great magical powers, this poor monk wouldn't have called him Grandmaster. Saying this, Xiao Hua glanced at the azure lion and the strange bird that stopped not far away. You don't need to say it. The bitterness on Xiao Hui's face didn't decrease. He looked at the old monk on the groove and asked, what is this elder's Buddhist name? This poor monk doesn't know. Xiao Hua shook his head. When this poor monk came, he had already asked, but the elder didn't answer. At the same time, he also didn't give this poor monk any Buddhist name. Tantric Buddhism, oh Tantric Buddhism. Xiao Hui sighed. This poor monk doesn't know what to say. Tantric Buddhism has been around for so long, it's unlikely that they would pass on the traitorous sutra to a little monk who has just entered the sect, right? If Grandmaster doesn't want to say it, then don't say it. Xiao Hua replied, wait until this poor monk incinerates the elder's body and takes out the elder's Sarira merit. You can start now. Siai Hui nodded. He took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of the wooden plank. He clasped his hands together and started to chant. His voice was very rhythmic. Although it wasn't loud, it clearly floated within 3 jong, 3:33 m. Strands of Buddhist light were emitted from Siai Hui's body and slowly covered the old monk's body. Amitabha. Xiao Hua also chanted the rebirth mantra. He walked forward and lit the wooden plank with the oil lamp in his hand. The bright yellow flame on the wooden plank gradually rose and slowly wrapped around the old monk's corpse. Xiao Hua's heart was somewhat desolate. This old monk had bitterly guarded this place for nearly 100 years. In the end, only this ball of flame accompanied him. Everything else had turned into smoke and dust floating in the air. You can start now, little monk. Seeing that the flame was gradually growing bigger and Xiao Hua was still chanting with his head lowered, Siai Hui couldn't help but remind him. Start. Start what? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. He stopped chanting and raised his head to look at Siai Hui. Siai Hui was stunned and blurted out, Aren't you going to burn this elder's saria? Xiao Hua's heart jumped. He knew that things weren't good. He hurriedly let the Buddha saria flip through the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist scriptures. He braced himself and said, after burning the elder's body, won't the saria naturally come out? Sigh. Let this poor monk do it. If we wait any longer, it will be too late. Siai Hui opened his mouth to explain, but looking at the flame, he could only pat his forehead. A Buddhist light flew out from the top of his head. Then, his hands moved again. It was actually a Buddhist seal that Xiao Hua had never seen before. Little monk. The woman at the side was originally solemn with her head lowered. At this moment, she couldn't help but speak again. Saria is the foundation of the cultivation of a Buddhist disciple. Presumably, little monk should also have a saria, right? These bodhisattvas would use a Buddhist mystic art to condense their negative karma and merit into their relic before they left. When the Buddhist fire burned their bodies, the negative karma would condense into the relic and fuse with it. The saria can protect the Buddhist disciple's karma in this life and prepare for the Buddhist disciple's cultivation in the next life. And this elder looks very old. I'm afraid he doesn't have any Buddhist cultivation and is just an ordinary monk. These monks can't condense their karma and merit. Therefore, even if they can use the Buddhist fire to create a saria, it will be melted bones and other things. Other than being a souvenir and for people to admire, it has no other use. If you want to keep their karma and merit, you can only rely on external forces. And this kind of external force. To be honest, fellow Daoist Siai Hui doesn't have this kind of divine ability. He can only create a saria. And this saria isn't that saria. Xiao Hua suddenly understood and said with a bitter smile, this poor monk really doesn't know. The woman glanced at Xiao Hua and shook her head slightly. Looks like you really don't know. You only have the cultivation of the Buddhist sect. While speaking, Siai Hui had already formed a seal with both hands. The Buddhist light emitted from his forehead condensed in the Buddhist seal, just like the 9 syllables mantra in Xiao Hua's mouth. Seeing the golden characters condense in the Buddhist seal, Siai Hui raised his hand and lightly scolded. The golden characters the size of a fist shone brightly and flew out from Siai Hui's hand. The brilliance of the golden characters was extremely bright. Xiao Hua unconsciously closed his eyes. And at this very moment, something strange happened. The old monk's body that was originally lying motionless on the wooden board suddenly moved. The old monk's closed eyes also opened. His turbid eyes looked at the sky blankly. But in just a moment, the Buddhist fire and the Buddhist light were reflected in his eyes. The old monk's orange peel-like face unexpectedly showed a rare kind of gratification and relaxation, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His lips trembled slightly. Looking at the shape of his mouth, it should be Southern Gate Metria Buddha tilde. However, without waiting for the old monk to open his mouth, the Buddhist seal in Siai Hui's hand had already expanded from the size of a fist to the size of 1 jong, covering the entire groove at the foot of the mountain. Boom! On the wooden board, The Buddhist fire on the old monk's body flourished and unexpectedly turned into a pair of third-grade lotuses, completely submerging the old monk. The old monk smiled. The turbidity in his eyes unexpectedly disappeared and a kind of clarity flashed. That relaxed smile and the satisfaction of getting what he wanted condensed on his face. -12. Chapter 3406. After the lotus-shaped flame flourished, it turned into 3 balls of flame and gradually disappeared. At the moment when the 3 balls of flame were extinguished, a faint shadow flew out from one of the flames. It was the old monk's soul. The old monk respectfully bowed to Sai Hui and said, "Amitabha, thank you, Venerable One." Immediately, the soul turned into thousands of fireflies and disappeared. Amitabha Tilda seeing this, Xiao Hua was delighted in his heart. At the same time, he was also sincerely convinced. Just a moment ago, in front of the main hall of the Xiao Linglong temple, he used the Buddhist sect's 9 syllables mantra, but it didn't have the slightest effect. Here, Sai Hui formed a Buddhist seal and immediately helped the old monk cross over. "Thank you, Great Master Sai Hui." Xiao Hua happily bowed and said, "If Great Master didn't help, I'm afraid I would have disappointed the elder. The elder's relics and other things can't be left behind. Take this relic." Looking at the place where the old monk's soul just flew out, a relic smaller than a little finger appeared. Sai Hui said with a bitter face, "He introduced you to Buddhism, so he should be your guide. His karma, if you have magical powers in the future, you should help him eliminate it. Of course, this poor monk can't guarantee whether or not there is any karma in this relic. Yes, this poor monk knows. This female benefactor has already explained it." Xiao Hua looked at the relic floating in the air. The color was very turbid, and there were many different colors inside. It wasn't particularly pure. Obviously, the old monk's cultivation realm wasn't very high. Xiao Hua waved his hand and was about to take the sarira. However, he had a thought and slowly walked over. He carefully picked it up with his hands and put it into his arms. After doing all this, he turned his head and asked Sai Hui, "Great Master, this little monk has a question. I don't know if I can ask you." Hearing Xiao Hua call himself little monk, the bitter expression on Sai Hui's face slightly disappeared. She nodded and said, "Monk, if you have something to say, please say it." The old monk has bitterly guarded the Great Snow Mountain, so he must be someone with a tenacious mind. Similarly, I've heard the old monk say that he has studied Buddhism for nearly 100 years, so why is his sarira not as sparkling and translucent as others? Xiao Hua naturally didn't hold back and immediately asked. Earlier, Enyu Tanyu had already said that the eminent monk who has the secret technique of our Buddhism sect can refine the sarira that he has cultivated all his life before he goes to the West. The process of refining naturally has the effect of eliminating karma. When the karma is gone, the sarira will naturally look very good. Sai Hui explained, "This elder does not practice mystic techniques and only studies Buddhist scriptures. He does not have the ability to condense his own negative karma. Therefore, it is not strange that the colors in the relic are mixed. However, for you, this kind of mixed color relic is the best. The old monk is your guide. Helping him get rid of his karma is what you should do. If you help him get rid of his negative karma, your merit will also increase. Even when you condense your golden body, his sarira can also be used. And in those sarira that have already been condensed, the simple negative karma has been eliminated. What is left is the heavy negative karma, which is not easy to remove. Even if you want to use it to condense your golden body, you have to be careful." Speaking of this, Sai Hui was a little radiant. She said again, "As far as little monk knows, your Buddhism sect has already fallen to a lower level. Now in the Pure Land world, the Buddha Lord of my Lei-Yin temple has passed down the Mahayana Buddhist scripture. Under this Mahayana Buddhist scripture, even an ordinary monk can condense sarira. Little monk understands." "Thank you for your guidance." Xiao Hua didn't know what Mahayana Buddhist scripture was and what Hinayana Buddhist scripture was. He only slightly lowered his posture, and then slightly muttered to himself as he prepared to say goodbye. But at this moment, there was a faint chanting sound in the distance. Then, a faint golden light flashed from the chanting and flew over the great snow mountain. Oh! Buddha's radiance illumination? Xiaohui raised her eyebrows and raised her hand. The green lotus that she had just put away in her left hand suddenly appeared. The green lotus also emitted a deep chanting sound and flashed with a Buddhist light that seemed to be breathing. Whoosh! Like a sword of light, a strand of Buddhist light emerged from the golden light and entered the green lotus. Then, the golden light and the chanting continued to fly forward. Xiaohui withdrew his gaze from the distant golden light and looked at the green lotus. He saw a Buddhist document that had already lost its Buddhist light and was quietly lying there. Xiaohui put away the green lotus, reached out her hand and picked up the Buddhist edict. She opened it and looked at it, then handed it to Xiaohui and said, "Little monk, this Buddhist light shines through your big snow mountain. You are the only disciple of Tantric Buddhism here, you should accept this Buddhist edict." "Ah! Buddhist decree? What do you mean?" Xiaohui stared blankly, somewhat at a loss. Can this little monk not accept it? The Buddha's light illumination is the way the Lei temple sends out the Buddha's decree to all the temples in the Pure Land world. Xiaohui was very patient and explained, wherever the Buddhist light passes, all the temples have to accept the Buddhist edict. You are a Buddhist disciple, naturally you have to accept it. But, speaking until here, Xiaohui was somewhat embarrassed. Xiaohui did not know how to accept the Buddhist light. Now, the Buddhist edict should be received by Xiaohui herself. Xiaohui not accepting it was not a big deal. There is no content. Xiaohui pondered a little and said, Buddha Lord has decreed that if possible, every temple in my Pure Land world must send 1 or 2 disciples to Changsheng town in hidden immortal continent, Xiaihang? Without waiting for Xiaohui to speak, that woman was suddenly startled. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Xiaohui. Xiaohui's eyes flashed with a somewhat complicated expression. She looked at that woman and nodded slightly without saying anything. Mitch, your Buddha Lord is really good at scheming. That woman snorted coldly. Could it be that he really wants to build a 99 jong tall golden body of Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva in Changsheng town? Ah! Xiaohui raised his eyebrows. His heart was overwhelmed with shock. This. Xiaohui shook her head. This poor monk does not know the Buddha Lord's plan. This poor monk is only a Buddhist disciple. If he does this. That woman opened her mouth, seemingly having a lot of complaints. However, when they reached her mouth, they turned into helplessness, leaving behind only a trace of hidden bitterness. I'm afraid it will cause a huge wave. Little monk, quickly accept this Buddhist edict. This poor monk still has something to say to you. Xiaohui did not dare to talk too much with that woman. She turned her head and passed the Buddhist edict to Xiaohui again. Xiaohui hurriedly waved his hand. Master, this little monk does not have the ability to accept this Buddhist edict. This is your divine ability, you should keep it for yourself. This little monk will go back and recite scriptures in front of the Buddha. Phut! That woman could not help but laugh. She looked at Xiaohui and said, Fellow Daoist Xiaohui, you really made an unnecessary move. Forget it. Xiaohui looked at Xiaohui's shrinking appearance. Obviously, he was not prepared to accept the Buddhist edict. She smiled bitterly and said, Since you are not willing to accept it, this poor monk can only leave this Buddhist edict behind. Of course, you are the only monk in this snowy mountains temple. Moreover, you have just shaved your head. According to the Buddhist edict, you do not need to go to the longevity town. It is good that Master knows, Xiaohui said with a smile. However, at this point, Xiaohui changed the topic and said, However, this poor monk still has something to discuss with you. If Master wants to go to that place, then it is better not to mention it. Xiaohui hurriedly waved his hand, not giving Xiaohui the opportunity to speak. However, Xiaohui still underestimated Xiaohui's persistence. Xiaohui did not even look at Xiaohui's waving hand and said, You have the root of wisdom. Moreover, when you shaved your head, there was a Buddhist vision. In the future, you will definitely be a pillar of my Buddhist sect. If you had a monk by your side to guide your cultivation, this poor monk would not say anything. After all, Tantric Buddhism is different from the other 12 sects. However, in the current situation, although you have entered my Buddhist sect, there is no one to guide you in cultivation. You are still in the same situation as before. You only have Buddhist divine abilities but not the protection of my Buddhist sect's Dharma. You should know that Buddha is 1 foot tall and the devil is 10 feet tall. Your cultivation is very easy to go astray. It is like a child with great strength holding a great killing weapon. If you are not careful, you will hurt others and also hurt yourself. This poor monk has also suffered a great loss before. Therefore, this poor monk does not dare to say that he is your senior. This poor monk only wants to ask you to follow this poor monk. This poor monk will tell you what he has learned. Xiao Hui's face was still somewhat bitter. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's heart warmed. In fact, Xiao Hua thought that if he did not accept the Buddhist edict just now, Xiao Hui could use it to threaten him. Xiao Hui could even use the name of a senior to ask him to follow. Of course, just now, Xiao Hui could also use the opportunity of refining the old monk's career to raise conditions for Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hui simply ignored these opportunities. She only used a pleading tone to speak to Xiao Hua. She spoke very sincerely, as if she was an old friend who had known Xiao Hua for a long time and wanted to ask Xiao Hua for help. Xiao Hua had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Now that he heard it, he could not help but secretly ponder. In fact, what Xiao Hua was worried about now was that he did not want Xiao Hui and that woman to know his Dao sect cultivation. He did not want them to know his identity as Dao sect Xiao Hua. As for what the two of them were planning, Xiao Hua was not afraid. Even if the two of them were nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua's Dao sect cultivation had completely recovered and he had even advanced to nascent soul. Even if he could not beat them, escaping would not be a problem. Speaking of Yuanying realm being unstable, this was indeed Xiao Hua's misgivings. However, Xiao Hua's situation was different from others. Others only had one primordial spirit. If they wanted to stabilize their realm, they could only meditate. However, Xiao Hua had many primordial spirits. Any one of them could replace Xiao Hua in meditating. Even if the green-robed Xiao Hua entered the Yuanying realm, the effect would be better than Xiao Hua's. Furthermore, stabilizing one's realm was a gradual process. Xiao Hua had just advanced to nascent soul a few days ago, and there was no situation where his Dao foundation was unstable. He did not necessarily have to cultivate in seclusion. Traveling to the Pure Land was not necessarily a bad thing, at least he could see what the so-called Pure Land was like. The only thing that Xiao Hua was afraid of was time. He had to pass through as much as possible before the space meridian collapsed, and return to the hidden immortal continent as soon as possible. After all, the matter of Jiang country's recovery had just begun, and there would definitely be many places where he would need to appear. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua raised his head and said, "This little monk thanks Master for his kind intentions." This little monk wants to ask, "Where are you going? What do you need this little monk to do? How long will it take?" -12. Chapter 3407. This. Xiao Hui hesitated slightly, looked at the woman, and said in a low voice, "This matter. Please explain it to me. Actually, it won't take much time. We're going to pay a visit to an expert from the Dao sect. If we can ask him to help, that would be for the best. I don't need to do anything, I just need to listen to immortal Xiao Hui's teachings." The woman had already thought this through and spoke without hesitation. If that expert from the Dao sect is unwilling to go, we may need to borrow a Dharma treasure from him. When that time comes, I will support that Dharma treasure. Little monk, you may need to use your golden body to exert some strength. How long will it take? Xiao Hua frowned. 1 month should be enough. The woman saw that Xiao Hua was a bit impatient, so she raised her eyebrows and replied indifferently. Xiao Hua muttered to himself for a moment. He knew that there shouldn't be any problems in a month's time. After all, when he checked earlier, the spatial meridian didn't show any obvious signs of collapse. However, Xiao Hua still said cautiously, "Master, if you want me to go, I have 2 conditions." "Hehe, You little monk. The woman pointed at Xiao Hua and said, others can't follow immortal Xiao Hui even if they want to. Now that immortal Xiao Hui has taken the initiative to find you, it seems like he's begging you. No matter, little monk, just say it. This is what I'm begging you. Xiao Hui said indifferently. I can go with master, but if I feel that it's dangerous, I can leave immediately. Xiao Hua said in all seriousness, my cultivation is limited and can't be compared to the two of you. Of course, how could there be danger? Xiao Hui and the woman spoke at almost the same time. The woman was clearly a bit displeased. Xiao Hua ignored the woman's reaction and said, the second condition is that I want to ask if master knows Jinshan Temple's Silent Void Zen Master. Jinshan Temple's Silent Void Zen Master? Xiao Hui was slightly stunned. She didn't know why Xiao Hua mentioned Silent Void. She nodded and said, of course I know. Why are you looking for him? I've heard Silent Void Zen Master's teachings before and have some friendship with him. If you have something, I can tell you. Yes, even if you want to become his disciple. It's nothing. This little monk has been repeatedly instructed by the old monk that there are some matters that I need to discuss with Still Void Great Zen Master. Great Zen Master only needs to tell this little monk the location of Jinshan Temple. How could Xiao Hua tell the truth? Xiao Hui smiled. What's so difficult about that? He then explained the location of Jinshan Temple and said, if possible, this poor monk can go with you to visit the Great Zen Master. Hehe, thank you so much, Grandmaster. Xiao Hua smiled and bowed. Since that's the case, can you come with us? The woman urged. Xiao Hua looked at the wooden planks and other objects that had already turned into ashes, as well as the newly added fire marks on the grooves. He sighed and said, please wait for a moment. This little monk will return to the temple to take a look. If there's nothing missing, I'll immediately return with you too. Little monk, come back quickly. She waved her hand, and the strange bird in the distance let out a long cry and flew over to the woman. The woman floated onto the bird, and the strange bird spread its wings and flew up into the sky, waiting quietly. Seeing the woman leave, clouds appeared under Xiao Hua's feet, and he also flew towards Xiao Linglong Temple. Looking at Xiao Hua's departing figure, Xiao Hui thought for a moment, then she also flew onto the azure lion. Buddha clouds appeared under the azure lion's feet, and it landed beside the woman. Seeing Xiao Hui fly over, the woman couldn't help but grumble, immortal friend Xiao Hui, didn't you say before that we would come over to take a look? Why are there so many problems? Is this little monk called Zhu Tepu worthy of your attention? Immortal friend. Xiao Hui sat on the azure lion, and said with a smile, my Buddhist sect emphasizes karma the most. Since we encountered a Buddhist phenomenon here, then this Buddha must be related to this poor monk. Look at this little monk's sharp aura, it's exactly the same as this poor monk in the past. This poor monk really can't bear to see him walk the wrong path like this poor monk. Everyone has their own path, that little monk is right. The woman said somewhat disdainfully, your path isn't his path, you can't walk the path for him, and you can't hinder him from walking his own path. But if he has someone else's guidance, at least he won't walk the wrong path. Xiao Hui didn't mind, and said with a smile, moreover, didn't you see that he also knows the cloud riding technique? Your cultivation as a Confucian cultivator should be of some use in that place. This little monk is somewhat mysterious. When the woman heard Xiao Hui mention Xiao Hua's Confucian cultivation, she slightly frowned. Not only did he not call you senior, he also didn't call me senior, and I can't sense what grade his Confucian cultivation has truly reached. This is karma. Xiao Hui nodded. Perhaps this time, we'll need his help when we go to that place. Ari, I hope so. The woman slightly nodded, a faint sadness appearing in her eyes. He's here. While speaking, Xiao Hua's figure flew out from the foothills, and Xiao Hui said with a smile, he didn't ask about this matter before, but now that we're going together, we'll definitely have to explain it to him. Hee, that's natural. The woman said with a smile, there's nothing to hide about this matter, since he's going, we'll naturally have to explain it to him. At this point, the woman frowned, the little monk doesn't seem to have a mount, you'll have to take care of him. Of course, I can't let you take care of him. Xiao Hui smiled and patted the indigo lion to Xiao Hua's side. Seeing the strange bird and the indigo lion flying over, Xiao Hua raised his voice. Master, this little monk can go now. But before we go, shouldn't you explain to this little monk where we're going? Of course, of course. Xiao Hui said with a smile. I've already told fellow Daoist Xin Xin about this matter, and asked her to explain it to you. Xin Xin? Xiao Hua frowned, and immediately thought of Princess Bai Hua, Xin Yi, and said to himself, why are they both surnamed Xin? Could it be related to this woman and Bai Nu country? However, Xiao Hua still smiled. Please explain, fellow Daoist Xin. It's nothing much tilde, I'll explain as we walk. Xin Xin looked at Xiao Hua, and didn't show any displeasure because of Xiao Hua's disrespect, and said, moreover, if it's convenient, I feel that this little monk should change into a monk's robe. This tantric monk's robe really doesn't look pleasing to the eye. Hihi, that's true, tantric disciples rarely walk in the Pure Land world. This little monk will attract a lot of attention. Xiao Hui also nodded, and asked, little monk, if you don't have an extra monk's robe, this poor monk has an extra one here. Xiao Hua touched his nose, looked at the monk's robe on Xiao Hui's body, then looked at his own yellow monk's robe, and said readily, if that's the case, then that's for the best. This little monk doesn't want to be stared at by others. Immediately after, Xiao Hua took the monk's robe from Xiao Hui, and caught up with Xin Xin again. After hearing about the place she was going to, Xiao Hua sat on the indigo lion's butt, and followed the two people into the distance. In just the time it took to eat a meal, Xin Xin had already explained the matter, but the more Xiao Hua listened, the more he frowned. Because according to Xin Xin, she was going to invite Xiao Hui and a Dao sect cultivator by the name of Heaven Flipping Venerable to a secret place. This place was passed down from ancient times, and it was there before the Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect joined hands to destroy the Dao sect. Moreover, this secret place was left behind by the Dao sect, and there were formations set up by the experts of the Dao sect, and there were even monsters that the Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect didn't know about. What shocked Xiao Hua the most was that Xin Xin wanted to go to this place for an immortal tool. Yes, that's right, an immortal tool that only immortals can use. As for Xin Xin's identity, Xin Xin didn't mention it, and Xiao Hua also asked, but Xin Xin just smiled and didn't answer. Looking at Xin Xin riding the strange bird, Xiao Hua sat on the indigo lion's butt, and fell into deep thought. From Xin Xin's words, Xiao Hua faintly smelled the scent of a conspiracy. Because whether it was Xin Xin's identity, the secret place, or the immortal tool, they all gave Xiao Hua a kind of uneasy feeling. In the Dawn Rain continent, Xiao Hua also encountered this kind of thing, and it seemed that every matter had a bad ending, and every bad ending made Xiao Hua feel like he had a narrow escape from death. Immortal tool R, a magic tool used by immortals. Xiao Hua had never heard of it before in the Dawn Rain continent. Although Xiao Hua could already refine spirit tools, and he also knew the power of spirit tools, but he never dared to imagine the power and appearance of magic tools used by immortals. This Xin Xin was obviously a Confucian cultivator, so how did she know the secret place? Why didn't she have any scruples about looking for that immortal tool? Great Master Xiao Hui. Xiao Hua pondered for a long time, but he didn't have any plans, so he could only open his eyes and ask, Immortal friend Xin, what is her identity? You actually followed her to look for the immortal tool, aren't you afraid of falling into her trap? At this time, Xiao Hui didn't take out the green lotus and sword, but quietly sat cross-legged in front of Xiao Hua. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, she slightly leaned to the side and said with a smile, this poor monk also doesn't know what identity immortal friend Xin has. This poor monk met her for the first time in Qingluan Mountain 70 years ago, and then we met a few more times. Although she was a Confucian cultivator, she didn't have any prejudice against my Buddhist sect, and we talked very happily, so we could be considered old friends. A few years ago, she sent a message to this poor monk, saying that she had a big discovery, and wanted to invite this poor monk. This poor monk naturally gladly agreed. Because she wanted to make some preparations, she pushed it to these few days. As for the immortal tool, I only heard about it a few days ago. That thing is a Dao sect cultivator's treasure, and has nothing to do with my Buddhist sect's disciples, so this poor monk only wanted to remind her. Since immortal friend Xin is already prepared, How about this poor monk accompany her? It's that simple. Xiao Hua was a bit flabbergasted. This Xiao Hui seemed to be too unguarded, right? She didn't even know Xin Xin's origin, yet she followed her, and even pulled him in. Looking at Xiao Hui, Xiao Hua was a bit suspicious whether this young monk was deliberately pulling him down. -12. Chapter 3408. Looking at Xiao Hua's puzzled gaze, Xiao Hui smiled and said, "Little monk, sometimes you can't think too clearly about the matters of the world. If you think too clearly, you won't be able to do anything. This poor monk only knows that he is a Buddhist disciple and has no interest in that so-called immortal tool. And fellow Daoist Xin only invited this poor monk to help her break the formation. As for other matters, this poor monk really doesn't want to ask too much. The problem is..." Xiao Hua was flustered and exasperated. "Master, why are you pulling this little monk? This little monk still wants to cultivate in the temple." Xiao Hua was so anxious that he almost called this Xiao out. Xiao Hui was still neither fast nor slow as she said indifferently, "Little monk, is this your plan? No matter how this poor monk looks at it, you don't look like a Buddhist disciple who can cultivate peacefully. Then tell me, what is a Buddhist disciple who cultivates peacefully like?" Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and asked in a bad mood. "At the very least, you have to respectfully call other people senior. At the very least, you have to humbly ask other people about things you don't understand. At the very least, you have to get used to chanting scriptures under the lamp." Without waiting for Xiao Hui to finish speaking, Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Senior, isn't it just a senior? What's so difficult about it?" Before this little monk entered Buddhism, this little monk didn't call other people senior. Since you are a monk, then you have to be less impetuous, more steady, less suspicious, and more trusting. Xiao Hui smiled cheerfully and said, "Since you are a Buddhist disciple, this poor monk won't ignore it. Whether you are from Tantric Buddhism, strict flower school, or other sects, this poor monk has the responsibility to properly guide you." Sigh, forget it. Xiao Hua was speechless. Why did these words sound like he was reprimanding Xiao Jian? Now that karma came out of Xiao Hui's mouth, it actually made him seem so mischievous. However, thinking about how other things can be used to improve Jade, and how his Buddhist skills were not small, Xiao Hua could only lower his head. Seeing Xiao Hua admit defeat, Xiao Hui smiled and said, "Let's not talk about other things. This poor monk just saw the Buddhist phenomenon." Then, Xiao Hui began to talk about the Great Snow Mountain with Xin Xin. She narrated the contents of the Buddhist scriptures, the illusions, and her experience. Moreover, there was a trace of the way of karma hidden in her narration. Xiao Hua didn't care at first, but as he listened, Xiao Hua's ears perked up. In the end, Xiao Hua also interjected from time to time. The two were actually debating. The hidden immortal continent was different from the dawn rain continent. Whether it was Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, or demons, the cultivation methods were all different. Although there were some methods to distinguish the cultivation level of each other, most of the time, this method could not be taken seriously. Even pressure, primordial thought, divine thought, and Buddhist awareness could not be used as the standard to measure the cultivation level of a person or demon. The only way to test the cultivation level was to compete. Therefore, Xiao Hua did not have an estimate of Xiao Hui and Xin Xin's strength. Similarly, the two of them also did not have an estimate of Xiao Hua's strength. Especially Xiao Hui, she could not perceive the depth of Buddhist cultivation level from Xiao Hua at all. However, even though Xiao Hua called himself a little monk, his bearing was so calm. It was very obvious that his strength was not inferior to her and Xin Xin's. In fact, just from the fact that she could not perceive Xiao Hua's Buddhist cultivation level, Xiao Hui already knew that if Xiao Hua did not have a trace of Buddhist cultivation level, then he had strength that surpassed her. Although Xiao Hua kept saying that he had just entered the Buddhist sect, entering the Buddhist sect and having Buddhist cultivation level were two different things. Xiao Hua obviously belonged to the latter. And for Xiao Hua, a Buddhist disciple who knew Buddhist cultivation level but did not understand Buddhist doctrine, how could Xiao Hui not have the idea of feeding the tiger with her body? wanting to rely on her earnest advice to let the Pure Land world have another Buddha with profound Buddhist doctrine and outstanding Buddhist techniques. Not to mention Ci Hui breaking down Buddhist doctrine for Xiao Hua, and not to mention Xin Xin urging the strange bird to fly in front of them, the mountain range below the three of them overlapped one after another. Let's talk about a secluded place in front of the three of them, which was currently bustling with noise and excitement. This was a foothill that was flourishing with flowers. 4 mountain peaks that were like weights poked out of the sea of flowers. The mountain peaks were also covered with green pines and green cypresses. The sounds of apes and birds chirping could be heard from time to time from the mountain peaks. Moreover, a burst of fog was like a veil swaying in the wind, gradually covering the entire mountain peaks. However, in just a moment, rays of sunlight were cast down from the thick clouds. It was like a huge light sword piercing through the fog. The fog rolled and rolled, revealing the mountain peaks and rocks. The sunlight passed through the fog and shone on the mountain stream. The mountain stream looked very deep, but a stream of mountain spring gushed out from various parts of the mountain stream, emitting a gurgling sound. It was like the weeping of a woman alone in her boudoir, but also like the flute playing by a Confucian scholar's lips. With great difficulty, the sunlight fell on the mountain stream's spring water. The mountain rocks in the spring water were rugged, shattering the golden light. Bits and pieces of crystal scattered on the surface of the water, making people feel intoxicated. The spring water gurgled as it fell into the mountain stream and converged into a pool. The pool water was long and there were duckweeds floating in it. Occasionally, 1 or 2 small fish with silver-white bellies would happily swim out from the depths of the pool. They drew 2 light lines on the surface of the pool before suddenly disappearing. The pool was located in the depths of the mountain stream, and the sunlight couldn't reach it. If the clouds didn't block the sunlight, wisps of water vapor mixed with white mist would seep out from the 4 walls of the mountain stream at some point in time, covering the pool as well. Seeing the mist that was as ethereal as immortal clouds appear, an old man in a green daoist robe suddenly appeared on a protruding stone wall at the top of the pool. This old man's hair and beard were all white, and his face was thin. His eyes were slightly closed, but the 2 palms outside of his daoist robe were abnormally white. Although he was very thin, the veins on his skin were clearly visible, like the veins of jade. Gu. The moment the old man in the daoist robe appeared, he slightly opened his mouth and let out a toad-like cry. Then, the white fog and water vapor above the pond rushed into his mouth like a waterfall. In a moment, the entire mountain stream was devoid of water vapor, revealing the dark green pond from before. Pu. The old man in the daoist robe did not stop. He patted his forehead, and a dragon-shaped brilliance rushed out from the top of his head. After the brilliance, a mist mixed with water droplets also roared into the sky, like a real dragon sitting cross-legged above the mountain stream. Go! After a moment, the old man in the daoist robe opened his eyes and recited a mantra. The dragon-shaped mist suddenly stopped and instantly turned into thousands of water droplets that fell down, hitting the stone wall and the pond. Alas! Water vapor convergence, water vapor convergence. The old man in the daoist robe looked at the water droplets that turned into mist. He sighed and said to himself, "This old man has already cultivated the water vapor convergence, but why can't I understand the meaning of this water vapor convergence? Is it possible that the water vapor convergence of Confucian cultivators has another essence? Is there a mystery that this old man doesn't know? This is impossible. The Liao family's cultivation method may have a problem, but the Kanglong River's cultivation method can't have a problem, right? Their cultivation methods are similar with only minor differences. But since the cultivation method is correct, this old man's cultivation method also has no problem. Why doesn't this water vapor convergence have any special power?" As the old man spoke, he waved his hand and a 2-foot-long nascent soul came out of the old man's head. The nascent soul was wearing a treasure armor and was holding a ruler that was a few inches long. The ruler gave off a cold, blue light. As soon as the old man's nascent soul appeared, it immediately threw the ruler in its hand. Its 2 small hands rubbed slightly. A blue brilliance emerged from the nascent soul's hand. As the nascent soul waved its hand, the blue brilliance fell into the deep pool. Buzz. A burst of roaring sound came from the pool. The entire pool swelled up as if the whole pool was boiling. The nascent soul opened its eyes. Its starry eyes flashed with a green brilliance. Then the nascent soul raised its hand. The entire pool of water rushed out like a giant python. It was 100 times more arrogant than the water vapor and mist from before. Boom! With a loud sound, the pool of water hit the stone wall. The entire stone wall turned into powder and half of the stone wall shook slightly. Then, like a child playing, the nascent soul controlled the huge anaconda to dance around the mountain stream and the mountain peak. Wherever the anaconda passed, whether it was the tough mountain rocks or the thick trees, they were all turned into powder. Occasionally, the birds that flew over the mountain stream were also crushed by the anaconda and turned into blood foam. Ari! Seeing the water python's power, the old man's nascent soul didn't rejoice. Instead, he sighed and muttered to himself in a sharp voice, "Our Tao sect's simple spell is more powerful than water essence convergence. Why was our Tao sect destroyed by Confucian cultivators? That bullshit water vapor convergence is regarded as a classic by countless Confucian families, but in this old man's eyes, it is so childish and laughable." The old man's nascent soul seemed to be very depressed. It withdrew its hand and the blue brilliance disappeared. The nascent soul sitting in the old man's hair also withdrew into the old man's body. Woo! It was as if thousands of waterfalls were pouring down. The water that was still raging in midair suddenly fell from midair. Not only did it cause the trees around the mountain stream to sway, even the water droplets splashed up from the mountain stream were comparable to a rainstorm. Just as the old man's nascent soul disappeared and he opened his eyes, a powerful divine sense swept across the sky and the mountain before landing on the old man's body. Who is it? The moment the old man sensed the divine sense, it was as if he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. He immediately flew up from the rock and ignored the water vapor that still covered the mountain stream. His face was filled with extreme shock as he looked at the source of the divine sense in disbelief and shouted, "Hee hee! Who else could it be? Naturally, it's this old man." A thunderous voice came from the horizon. -12. Chapter 3409. You. Who are you? The old man seemed to be unfamiliar with this voice and asked with a trembling voice. Then he clapped his hand without hesitation and a fist-sized, dark green spider appeared in his hand. Puff! The old man opened his mouth and a ray of blue light landed on the spider. The spider suddenly grew until it was several dozen feet long. At the same time the spider transformed, the old man's body also emitted a brilliance. When the old man landed on the spider's back, wisps of water vapor flew out from the spider's body. Like a fountain, they shot high into the air and landed on the mountain ridges around the mountain stream. Swoosh! Gently, like the sound of water, where the water vapor landed, streaks of water blue brilliance spread out in all directions. In just a short moment, the 4 mountains that were like weights were covered by the water blue brilliance. From a distance, this blue light looked like a spider web, and the spider under the old man was the owner of this web. Ha ha! Little heaven-flipping brat, you're still so cowardly. You're just as the others said. There was no trace of the voice. Even though the old man spread his divine sense out for several hundred kilometers, he still couldn't see anything. However, this voice was so arrogant that it seemed to be right next to the old man. The old man's face became a bit ugly and he coldly shouted, "Which celestial friend has come to visit my 4-flat mountain? Since you're here, don't be so sneaky. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for not giving you face. Ha ha ha, this old man wants to come. Do I still need you to give me face?" The voice laughed loudly, causing the blue light to tremble. "Rise." The old man sneered and waved his hand. A water blue brilliance rushed forward and turned into a flying sword of more than 100 feet in size. With a woo sound, it swept across the air. Although it didn't hit anything, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploded in the space of about 100 feet. The momentum was extremely vast. "Haha, little guy, this old man hasn't arrived yet. Why are you wasting your spiritual energy like this?" The voice still had a hint of mockery as it arrogantly laughed. Could it be that you're welcoming this old man? The old man in the daoist robe bit his lip and spread out his divine sense. He was very cautious as he looked around. He didn't believe the words of this voice. Rumble. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the sound of rolling wind and thunder could be heard from the horizon. A group of grey clouds emerged from that place and flew toward the mountain stream with lightning speed. This. The old man in the daoist robe looked at the cloud in disbelief. He quickly spread out his divine sense to see what was inside the cloud. However, just as his divine sense touched the cloud, an irresistible force came from the cloud and tore his divine sense apart. Ah! The old man in the daoist robe let out a miserable scream and quickly retracted his divine sense. His originally shocked face was now as white as snow. Ha ha! Just you, a nascent soul cultivator, you dare to spy on this old man? The voice like rumbling thunder came from the grey cloud. Who are you? The old man in the daoist robe stomped on the spider and a green light surrounded the old man. Only then did he gnash his teeth and shout. As he spoke, the grey cloud had already arrived next to the 4 mountains. The cloud violently churned and the face of a young man appeared in the air. The mouth formed by the cloud opened as if it wanted to devour the 4 mountains. He said, "You don't need to know who this old man is. Even if this old man told you my name, you might not know it. All you need to know is that this old man is a daoist cultivator and you are a disciple of my daoist sect. This old man is naturally a disciple of the daoist sect, but this old man doesn't want to interact with other daoist sect disciples. This old man only wants to cultivate in peace. Although fellow daoist is a senior of my daoist sect, you can't force me to do something I don't want to do." The old man in the daoist robe wasn't afraid at all. He looked at the face formed by the cloud and coldly spoke. Since this old man was suppressed in the eye of the West Ocean, how did the daoist sects of the 3 continents become so cowardly? The face formed by the grey cloud snorted. There are simply too many cowards like you. You only care about your own cultivation and never care about the lives of others. You hide the arrogant heads of our daoist sect in your turtle shells. This is why those immature scholars of the Confucian sects and those shameless monks of the Buddhist sects can trample our daoist sect under their feet. If you all had a strong heart, our daoist sect wouldn't have fallen to this state. You. When the old man in the daoist robe heard this, he was first stunned and then, as if he had been struck by lightning, he stood there in a daze. He looked at the cloud with absolute astonishment and said "you" several times. However, in the end, he didn't dare to call out this person's name. It was clear that this person's name was extremely famous and he absolutely didn't dare to call out his name. Hehe, I didn't think that after all these years, this old man's name is still so famous. Fantien brat. It seems like this old man found the right person to look for you today. The cloud seemed to be frozen in midair. Although there were gusts of wind, it couldn't blow away a single strand of cloud. The voice that was like rolling thunder was heard again and arrogantly. "Since you know who this old man is, there's no need to call out my name. The South Continent is the territory of that old monk. He has cultivated the 6 Buddhist divine abilities to the extreme. It's not easy for this old man to take the risk to come here. If you call out my name, that old monk might hear it." Hearing this, the old man named Fantien bit his lips slightly. His expression was uncertain as he stared at the cloud. No one knew what he was thinking. However, a moment later, a trace of mockery appeared on the old man's face. He let out a cold snort and said, "Senior, no matter who you are or why you're here, I'm not interested at all. In my eyes, there's only cultivation and the heavenly Tao. It's my luck to be able to enter the daoist sect, but everything in the daoist sect has nothing to do with me. The rise and fall of the daoist sect isn't something I can influence, nor is it something you can decide. There's no need for you to say anything more. If you don't have anything else to say, please forgive me. I'm going to cultivate." After he finished speaking, the old man cupped his hands towards the clouds. Then, his body flashed with a blue brilliance as he descended towards the mountain peak below. Ha ha ha! The cloud didn't seem to be angry and only laughed wildly. When this old man roamed the 3 continents, you weren't even born yet. You probably know my name, but you don't know my temper, right? To tell the truth, if it was in the past, this old man would immediately kill you because of what you said. Not to mention a mere nascent soul cultivator like you. Even astral and spirit-severing cultivators have to be respectful when they see this old man. However, since the Daoist sect has withered and you're a rare nascent soul cultivator in the 3 continents, this old man will tolerate you for a moment. What can you do? The old man seemed to be absent-minded and turned a deaf ear to the cloud's words. His body quickly sank into the blue light and gradually disappeared. Damn it! When the cloud saw that the old man didn't listen to its orders and was on guard against it, it let out a roar of anger. The entire cloud was like a fountain in a mountain stream and violently swelled. Strands of cloud flowed up and down and quickly expanded. Grey light flickered and turned into black and white at the center of the cloud. The white light soared into the sky and the black light fell. In just a moment, the cloud that was only several tens of feet in size had expanded to several acres in size. Although it wasn't enough to completely cover the 4 mountains, the dark cloud's overbearing aura seemed to have substance as it charged towards the blue light between the 4 mountains. Looking at the water blue brilliance again, it didn't show any weakness. After the old man in the Daoist robe disappeared, rays of brilliance overflowed from the 4 mountain peaks. The water blue brilliance surged and roared like real waves. In a short moment, the water light under the clouds actually rose several jong high. Moreover, as the water waves surged, the rhythm of the water light released by the 4 mountains gradually became consistent. Under the splendor of the water waves, a whirlpool as thick as a bowl was formed under the impact of the intense water light. Woo-woo! A sound that was even louder than the sound of flowing water came from these vortexes. A huge current of air descended from the sky and the world's origin energy within several tens of kilometers of the surrounding mountains rushed into these vortexes. As if the wind was helping the waves, the light that was several tens of feet in height rose up once more and soared several tens of feet into the air. Kaka! Heaven-flipping brat, is this your rippling flood peak formation? From within the cloud, an arrogant voice filled with disdain sounded. It was like the ringing of a golden bell. You're truly a disgrace to my Daoist sect. Can you not use such fancy things? Although your water light looks extremely powerful, in reality, it has already broken down its power. If you meet a strong enemy, they will be able to destroy your weakness in one move. Your water light looks like gold on the outside but it's rotten on the inside. Wung wung. The old man in the Daoist robe didn't reply. However, the tens of thousands of vortexes in the blue light began to vibrate. Before the voice could drift into the distance, the light that was mixed with the thin threads of white light rushed out from the vortexes. Tens of thousands of light pillars condensed into a light pillar that was several tens of acres in size and brazenly attacked the clouds that were also surging towards the ground. The light pillar's power was so great that the hissing sounds between the tens of thousands of small light pillars resounded throughout the world. Ha ha ha. Interesting. It seems like you still have some tricks up your sleeve. That old voice was still laughing loudly, as if he did not care about such a powerful attack. Sure enough, at the origin of the voice, wisps of pitch-black cloud threads reached down from the cloud layer like densely packed tentacles, welcoming the enormous light pillar. Before the pitch-black cloud threads could come into contact with the light pillar, more completely white cloud threads followed closely behind the black cloud threads and rushed out. Wisps followed by wisps, appearing very strange as they descended. -12. Chapter 34:10. Woo-woo. When the light pillar collided with the cloud pillar, it didn't cause a huge wave. Instead, the sound waves that surged between heaven and earth suddenly disappeared, as if something had blocked the source of the sound. Looking at the light pillar that was as bright as a morning star, it seemed to be covered by dark clouds, or even polluted by cloud threads. The black cloud threads first touched the light pillar that was as thick as a bowl, then quickly spread downwards, annihilating the light pillar's aqua blue brilliance. In particular, the weak cloud threads seemed to have the power of 10,000 catties. When the light pillar's powerful attack came into contact with the cloud threads, it was blocked and couldn't advance even half an inch. The old man in the daoist robe was slightly shocked. Then, the aqua-blue brilliance at the 4 mountain peaks flourished again. However, before the brilliance of the 4 mountain peaks could form a whirlpool to assist in the battle, the white strands of cloud rushed into the pitch-black strands of cloud, instantly dyeing the top of the gigantic light pillar into a grayish-white color. Shua. Like the sound of a clear spring washing away sand and dust, or like millions of young silkworms swallowing mulberry leaves, layer after layer of sound filled the sky. Looking at the light pillar that had just been covered, it instantly collapsed, inch by inch, foot by foot, and foot by foot, it turned into nothingness. Strangely, the light pillar wasn't completely destroyed, but was instead sucked into the grey cloud thread. In a moment, the cloud threads grew bigger and thicker. This. The old man in the daoist robe turned pale with fright. What method is this? Kaka, my daoist sect's methods are heaven-defying. How could a nascent soul cultivator like you know? The arrogant voice sounded from the clouds again. This old man has only recovered 10 to 20%. It's more than enough to subdue you. Senior. The old man in the daoist robe was only dazed for a moment, then he said coldly, Senior is my daoist sect's teacher, and I also know that Senior has been suppressed by Confucian and Buddhist cultivators for tens of thousands of years. No matter what, it's still a meritorious service to my daoist sect, so I didn't dare to use my full strength for fear of hurting Senior. Just now, I've already made my thoughts clear. I only want to cultivate quietly, comprehend the will of heaven, and feel the will of the earth, and walk on the great path of daoist cultivation. I don't want to participate in the battle between Taoists and Buddhists. Ha ha ha, heaven-flipping brat. That voice sounded like it had descended 10 feet into the clouds and was much louder. When the nest is overturned, there are no eggs left intact. Do you really believe in the benevolence of the Buddhist monks? Their benevolence is for those who are loyal to them. Even if they were to give a portion to those demons, they would never give it to us Tao sect disciples. Don't think that those hypocrites will let you go just because you fled to the pure land of ultimate bliss and the hidden immortal continent. Don't think that those old bald donkeys of the Buddhist sect will tolerate you if you stay in the 4 Extremes mountains. Your actions would be laughable in the eyes of others, and your thoughts would be childish in the eyes of others. You are only a nascent soul cultivator now. Wait until you reach a higher level of enlightenment and reach the leaving aperture stage. Then, let's see what those old bald donkeys are capable of. Do you know what it means to subdue demons? Do you know what thunderbolt wrist is? You will be the devil in the future. You will be the monster under the thunderbolt wrist. At this point, the voice could not help but sigh. Back then, didn't I have the same thoughts as you? I thought that as long as I cultivated a supreme divine ability, I would be able to lead the 3 continents and revive our Tao sect. However, I was wrong. Although a single person's strength can reach the heavens, there is more than one person who can reach the heavens. That is why it is difficult to do things alone. Before I could cultivate to the great success stage, the Confucian cultivators and the Buddhist sect found out about me. Even the 1,000 demons sacred realm intervened. I don't want to talk about the specific details, but I believe there are many legends about me in the 3 continents. Therefore, when I escape this time, the first thing I want to do is to recover my cultivation. The second thing I want to do is to unite the Tao sect cultivators of the 3 continents. I want to gather all the strength of our Tao sect to fight against the Confucian cultivators and the Buddhist sect. As long as the Tao sect rises, I will be able to reach the great success stage. Only when I reach the great success stage can the Tao sect rise. As the voice came out of the clouds like a gust of wind, the black and white clouds of the devouring light pillar slowed down. Rather than saying that it was devouring, it was more like a deterrent to the Tao sect cultivator named Overturn the Heavens. Unfortunately, Overturn the Heavens only pondered for a moment before saying faintly, I am just an ordinary Tao sect cultivator. I only want to learn divine abilities and be free in the world. I am not interested in the battle between the Confucian and Buddhist sects. Moreover, I have many good friends in both the Confucian and Buddhist sects. They all know what I am thinking. I don't think I will end up like you, in the state of being unjust and lacking support. You are a man of great talent and vision. You should find other Tao sect cultivators who are as ambitious and idealistic as you. I only want to stay in a corner. You. The voice roared, causing the clouds to sway violently. Little overturn the heavens, don't think that I don't have any generals to send. Don't think that I don't care about your little bit of cultivation. Don't think that I don't know the little tricks you have in your heart. Overturn the heavens, didn't that mean overturning the heavens of the 3 continents? Do you think that no one would know that you're trying to hide something? Flipping Sky's voice was still indifferent. Flipping Sky is just a Daoist name, there will be 100 interpretations among 100 people. According to what Senior said, it should be a complete upheaval, right? It can't be overturn the heavens, but it means to freely overturn the heavens and earth. Timpate. There's no point in saying anything more. This old man has already tolerated you for a long time. The reason why I'm not willing to kill you is that you're a talented cultivator with great potential in my Tao sect. Moreover, you're in the Pure Land world and your identity isn't eye-catching. I want you to do something for me. Since you don't like toasting, then this old man can only let you taste the taste of a forfeit. After saying that, the black and white clouds suddenly emitted a bright light, and pressed down several times faster than before. The splendor of the blue light pillar suddenly dimmed by a lot. Your Excellency, you're forcing my hand. Flipping Sky's voice was not afraid, and he also changed the Senior to Your Excellency, as if Flipping Sky had other means to fight to the death. Ha ha ha. Little Flipping Sky, this old man has already said what needs to be said. If you're willing to die together with this old man, then it's your honor, but since this old man dared to come, why would I be afraid of your insignificant means? Chimpate. Flipping Sky snorted coldly. Ka. A strange sound came from the depths of the blue light, and then layers of pale light emerged from the blue. In an instant, the light pillar that was more than 10 acres in size actually condensed into a white ice pillar, and an indescribable coldness was emitted from this ice pillar. This coldness was so terrifying, not only did the vegetation and rivers within the 4 mountains more or less turn into ice beads, even the surface of the mountain rocks had crystallized. As the light pillar condensed into an ice pillar, the devouring of the black and white clouds came to an abrupt stop. Layers of clouds rolled on top of the ice pillar, and could not press down even half an inch. Not only that, with a loud woo sound, the ice pillar that was more than 10 acres in size slowly shook, and the pale white splendor overflowed rapidly. A fist that was more than 10 acres in size gradually took shape, and punched towards the huge cloud in the sky, as if it was going to shatter the sky with a punch. Hehe, this is the ice bead, right? The voice in the clouds sneered, this thing is merely a pellet in this old man's eyes. You, use your sea measuring ruler, only your natal magic weapon can resist this old man for a moment. Flipping Sky's expression was as usual, and he was not moved at all. He did not even say a word, and only focused on urging his mana. Following this sneer, the huge cloud layer suddenly shrank, and the black and white clouds condensed together once again. The clouds rolled, and the wind howled. However, other than the howling of the wind, the clouds did not emit any power, and even the brilliance commonly used in Tao sect's remarkable powers did not appear. Compared to the punch below the clouds, which had the power to destroy the heavens and earth, the difference was too great. Below the clouds, the frozen fist shot up 1,000 feet, and every strand of ice that flickered with a pale white brilliance contained a huge amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Below the ice pillar, a white bead the size of a bowl was spinning around. Below the white bead, there was a 3-foot baby that looked exactly like Flipping Sky. His face was flashing with a green brilliance, and his chubby hands were trembling slightly as he rubbed them together. The ruler that he was holding previously had disappeared. When the clouds had shrunk to a certain extent, they suddenly became transparent. Inside, an exceptionally bright white and black brilliance was born, just like 2 different colored suns. As soon as the brilliance was born, the clouds instantly stopped shrinking, and then rolled at an extremely fast speed. A huge black and white hand, several acres in size, was formed from the clouds, and grabbed towards the huge fist that was soaring into the sky. Puff. The huge hand grabbed onto the huge fist, and there was a loud noise. Countless waves of air rolled, and the spiritual energy that had gathered in the sky instantly turned into a gust of wind that whistled and blew away. Within hundreds of miles, sand and pebbles were blown away, and everything was chaotic. Not only that, although the huge fist was unusually cold, and contained a terrifying amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy, once it came into contact with the huge black and white hand, it immediately melted like an ice pillar under a raging fire. Almost as soon as the palm landed, the fist disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, more than 40% of the ferocious fist had disappeared. Yin-Yang Illustration Handbook. Not only did you break free from the Yin-Yang Illustration Handbook's suppression, you actually refined it. An extremely surprised and small voice cried out in disbelief. Under the huge fist, Flipping Sky's Yuanying's face was pale, and a stream of light blue blood was seeping out from the Yuanying's mouth and nose. The ice bead that was previously the size of a bowl on top of the Yuanying's head had now turned into a thumb-sized ice dregs. It was even lighter than a goose feather as it floated in mid-air, as if the huge hand had not only destroyed the ice pillar, but also the ice bead under the ice pillar. -12. Chapter 34:11. Keik. The voice was very proud, its laughter resounding through the heavens and earth. It shouted, "My Tao sect is a sect that seizes the good fortune of the heavens and earth. How can Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects be compared to it? Although my Tao sect was destroyed by them, their divine abilities and methods will forever be unknown to them. Although this old man was suppressed by them due to a moment of carelessness, this old man also profited from the disaster and had the opportunity to use my Tao sect's supreme secret technique to entrust my primordial spirit to the Yin-Yang Illustration Handbook. Now that this old man has an immortal and indestructible body, who in this world can be my opponent? Primordial spirit entrusting technique? Fan Tian's nascent soul had already slowly sunk into his body. Fan Tian slowly opened his eyes and asked himself in confusion. Obviously, he didn't understand what the primordial spirit entrusting technique was. The primordial spirit entrusting technique is a secret technique left behind by the immortal realm. How would a mere nascent soul cultivator like you know? Temph, have you seen this old man's methods? The voice shouted coldly, and the big hand suddenly opened up, instantly expanding by several times. It didn't care that he had already destroyed 40% of the icicles and covered the entire 4 mountains. He said, "Follow this old man. If you succeed under this old man will definitely help you become an immortal after my Tao sect prospers. This old man can also teach you this secret technique from the immortal realm." As he said that, a fiery red pill the size of a thumb flew out from the big hand and landed in front of Fan Tian's eyes. Fire God pill. This is for the nascent soul to leave the body. Fan Tian saw this pill and his face flashed with shock. A strange look couldn't help but drift across his eyes. That's right, this is the fire god pill that this old man refined. It's really suitable for cultivators like you who practice water-based techniques to leave the body. You bumped into this old man. This is your chance. Of course, it can also be said that this old man's escape is your good fortune. This is a chance given to you by the heavenly Tao. Other than this old man, in these 3 continents, who else can easily refine the fire god pill? Who else can so easily bestow the fire god pill to you? You really want to bestow the fire god pill to me? Fan Tian's tone had already softened. What do you want this old man to do? Very simple. Very simple. It's as easy as lifting a finger for you. The voice was resolute and unquestionable. It's just that this old man can't say it now. You'll know when you follow this old man. As he spoke, the giant hand made a grabbing motion. The entire ground shook, and the 4 mountains seemed to be uprooted from the ground. Sigh. Flipping Sky looked at the fire god pill in front of him, then looked at the violently shaking icicles and the 4 trembling mountains. With a sigh, he really couldn't resist this temptation. After sighing, He opened his mouth and spat out a breath of clear air onto the ice seed pearl. Buzz buzz. The ice seed pearl, which was originally like ice dregs, began to rotate. Waves of brilliance splashed out, and gradually turned into a sparkling and translucent white pearl. The splashed brilliance fell on the icicles, and the entire icicles collapsed with a loud bang. This collapse was very strange. It was from the outside to the inside. The outermost part of the icicles that connected to the 4 mountains was the first to melt. Woo! Without waiting for the icicles to completely disappear, the giant hand made a grabbing motion in midair. The icicles between the 4 mountains, along with Flipping Sky himself, were all caught by the giant hand. Amidst the howling winds, the dark clouds rolled and flew into the distance. In a moment, they disappeared, leaving behind only the 4 bare mountains and the mess between the mountains. Just as the dark clouds passed, there were immediately thousands of gusts of wind descending from the sky. The chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred miles surged back and forth. After a full half a day, the wind stopped. However, the countless chi of heaven and earth in this space had already triggered a celestial phenomenon. When the wind stopped, the dark clouds were densely gathered again. Without waiting for the moonlight to shine, there was a heavy downpour. Hail the size of a fist poured down, covering the area within 100 miles, especially between the 4 mountains. The sky was pitch black, but within the pitch black, there was a kind of transparency. That transparency was the layers of water light. Flipping Sky's ice seed pearl condensed the water-based chi of heaven and earth within a few hundred or even 1,000 miles. The giant hand formed by the yin-yang illustrated handbook suddenly absorbed the chi of heaven and earth, causing a loss of the chi of heaven and earth. The Grand Duke of Heavenly Tao, the surrounding chi of heaven and earth gathered here. How could a normal celestial phenomenon withstand so much water-based chi of heaven and earth? Now, the chi of heaven and earth had all condensed into hail within the raindrops. It fell crazily, and a rare mountain torrential rain suddenly appeared. Fortunately, Flipping Sky was cultivating in the wilderness, and there were no traces of people. Within 10 days, the wind and rain were dense, and there were no casualties. Another 4 to 5 days passed, and the wind and rain stopped. It was a sunny day, and the sound of waterfalls could be seen from the 4 mountain peaks. It was already another paradise. Especially between the mountain peaks, there were large and small ponds and lakes everywhere. Even if Flipping Sky came back again, he probably wouldn't be able to recognize the earth-shaking changes here. Since even Flipping Sky couldn't recognize this new scenery, then Shin Shin, Si Hui Boy, and Xiao Hua who was accompanying Si Hui Boy from afar wouldn't be able to recognize it. The 2 beasts stopped in mid-air, and Shin Shin floated down from the strange bird. She stepped on the auspicious cloud and landed in the middle of the 4 mountain peaks. She released her yuanshan and looked at it again and again. She reached out her hand and took out a diamond-shaped crystal object. Although she held it in her hand, she hesitated and didn't release it. Si Hui Boy saw Shin Shin's doubts and also jumped down from the azure lion. She flew in front of Shin Shin and said with a smile, "Shin Tanyu, is there anything wrong? You didn't hesitate at all along the way, and there was no deviation at all. Why did you stop here? This is the communication magic tool of the Taoist fellow immortal, right? Why didn't you send it out?" Shin Shin smiled bitterly and turned to look at the water under the scorching sun. She said, "Si Hui immortal friend, release your Buddhist awareness to check it out. Of course, if you have a Buddhist magic like Heavenly Eye, you can also use it. You can find some clues at that time." "Oh." Si Hui raised her eyebrows and didn't release her Buddhist awareness. Instead, she said with a smile, "Since Tanyu has found something wrong, why don't you tell me? Why do I have to do something unnecessary?" Hearing Si Hui's words, Shin Shin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A trace of helplessness flashed on her face. She said, "You Buddhist disciples are good at everything except this. You don't have any curiosity. Didn't you see the great change in the chi of heaven and earth here? The ponds between the 4 mountain peaks are also newly formed. Don't tell me you don't want to see for yourself what caused such a huge change." "I don't want to." Si Hui still smiled and replied faintly, There are 10,000 truths for everything in the world. The truth of every matter is different. Outside of this truth, there are also endless illusions. But if the world only sees illusions, who can discern the only truth? Even if I have heavenly eye or destiny connection, I can't see all the truths one by one. Amitabha, only my Buddha knows all the truths. If my Buddha lets me know, I don't need to pray, I will naturally know. But what if my Buddha doesn't let me know? Even if I wear out iron shoes, it's absolutely impossible for me to know the truth. Sigh. Shin didn't have any reaction facing Xiao Hui. She seemed to be used to these words. But Xiao Hua, who was lazily staying on the back of the azure lion, was suddenly stunned. That beautiful face flashed in his mind from time to time, that unforgettable voice sounded again. Tch brother-in-law is really a miser. Actually, in my opinion, the most beautiful thing in this world is none other than a confusing secret. All the secrets are hidden behind countless false appearances. Finding the essence of the matter from these fragmented clues is the most beautiful thing. Seeing Xiao Hua stunned, Xiao Hui's face showed a trace of a gratified smile. Her words weren't said to Shin. Although Shin was a Confucian cultivator, her attainments in Buddhist principles were admirable even to Xiao Hui. Although this kind of Buddhist principles were profound, Xiao Hui didn't think that Shin wouldn't understand. Xiao Hui's words were deliberately to help Xiao Hua. Along the way, Xiao Hua left a very good impression on Xiao Hui. Xiao Hua was originally a curious person. He liked to get to the bottom of ordinary matters. Now that he met Xiao Hui of the Buddhist sect, how could Xiao Hua, who had always been puzzled about Buddhist principles, give up such a good opportunity? From the beginning with a smattering of knowledge to now with a rough understanding, Xiao Hua's attainments in Buddhist principles were absolutely advancing by leaps and bounds. Xiao Hui certainly didn't know that Xiao Hua had a Buddha Sarira in his Niwan palace that was reciting the Buddhist scriptures of the exquisite temple day and night. Moreover, after Xiao Hua discovered the spiritual energy, it seemed that his spiritual cavities had opened up. Whether it was the comprehension of Taoist techniques, Buddhist principles, or even the cultivation of Devil World's blood drop paradise, his progress was extremely fast. This made Xiao Hui feel that Xiao Hua was an extremely intelligent Buddhist disciple. And the convergence of psychokinesis on the snowy mountain made Xiao Hui more and more aware that Xiao Hua was the reincarnation of a senior monk with extremely heavy roots. Along the way, Xiao Hui also talked about Buddhist principles with Xiao Hua without reserve. At this time, he encountered an excellent opportunity, so he naturally wouldn't give up. He casually talked about things and enlightened Xiao Hua on the essence of Buddhist principles. Unfortunately, Xiao Hui couldn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. No matter what, he didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. Zhu Xia's words and Xiao Hui's words are all referring to the essence and appearance of all things in the world. As the saying goes, different Taos cannot work together. The two people's thoughts and actions are so different. However, what is the real relationship between the two? Everyone has their own reasons. I don't know where Zhu Xia came from, but he emphasized on taking the initiative, seeking the first opportunity in all things. It's somewhat similar to my Taoist sect's cultivation method, which only strives for the vitality between heaven and earth. And Xiao Hui came from Buddhist sect, which emphasizes tolerance, obedience, and doesn't seek to stand out in all things. My thoughts are naturally in line with Zhu Xia's. However, Buddhist sect is the same as Taoist sect's cultivation path. How can my knowledge be inferior to Taoist sects? Even if it's different, it's still another path. Now that I want to cultivate both Buddhist and Taoist techniques, where should I go from here? -12. Chapter 34:12. You'd better welcome your Buddhist senior. Shin saw a flash of understanding in Xiao Hui's eyes and knew that he had gained something. She smiled and said, "Perhaps this senior can give you more guidance." A roar that sounded like a lion's roar came from afar, and a purple cloud drifted over. On the cloud stood a purple-haired who that was twice as tall as the azure lion. The purple-haired whose purple hair was several feet long, fluttering in the wind. On the ferocious beast's head, there was no fierceness in its fist-sized eyes. Instead, it had a very warm gaze that made people feel comfortable looking at it. Especially when it shook its head, there was a large collar with 2 silver bells around its neck. The clang-clang-clang sound was even more pleasing to the ears. On the purple-haired whose back was a tall monk. The monk's face was simple and unadorned. His eyebrows were white and the half-foot beard below his chin was also mixed with grey. The monk wore a grey monk's robe with a scabbard hanging from his waist. One of his hands was placed in front of his chest and the other was holding a demon-subduing pestle that was as thick as a duck egg. The monk's eyes were like stars. He didn't look at Xiao Hui, Xin Xin, and Xiao Hua. Instead, he looked at the 4 extremes mountains with puzzlement like Xin Xin did before. Amitabha, Junior Xiao Hui of Green Lotus Temple greets Senior. Xiao Hui didn't dare to be negligent. Before the monk withdrew his gaze, he stepped forward and bowed with his palms together. Seeing Xiao Hui step forward, Xiao Hua also braced himself and bowed. Junior body of small exquisite temple greets Senior. However, Xin Xin wasn't in a hurry to go over. With a smile on her face, she waited for the Buddhist disciples to greet each other. The monk nodded slightly and said, I'm Jiyuzhen of Red Lotus Temple. Are you here to find Dao Sect's Venerable Fantian? Hearing the old monk say his Dharma name, Xiao Hui didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly replied, Grandmaster, yes. We're here to find Venerable Fantian for some matters. What's the matter? Jiyuzhen frowned and asked faintly, You're a Buddhist disciple. Why are you so close to the remnants of Dao sect? This. Xiao Hui was a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, I don't know Lord Fantian, but I came here with this female Tan Yu. I am Xin Xin, a Confucian cultivator. Greetings, Grandmaster Jiyuzhen. Xin Xin didn't show any uneasiness on his face as he stepped forward and bowed. Which sect is this little girl from? Or which up-and-coming aristocratic family? Naturally, Jiyuzhen knew a little about the hidden immortal continent. Hearing that the surname Xin was not a special family of Confucian cultivators, he nodded and asked. Xin Xin smiled and said, This one's birth is not worth mentioning, so it's best if I don't make a fool of myself. Fellow Daoist Xiao Hui and this little monk were all invited by me. They don't know Venerable Overturning Heaven. However, may I know why Grandmaster Jiyuzhen is here? Jiyuzhen glanced at Xin Xin and said with a little dignity, Venerable Overturning Heaven is a Dao sect disciple. Although he has always been very disciplined, he is still a cultivator of the 4th level of essence qi. Now that the remnants of Dao sect are said to be rising from the ashes, this old monk was ordered by the abbot to take a look and remind Venerable Overturning Heaven not to make a mistake and enter the abyss of eternal damnation. The 3 of us also arrived here half an hour ago. Hearing this, Xin Xin knew that things were a little strange. She didn't dare to make excuses and hurriedly explained, the 4 extreme mountains are completely different from before. Venerable Overturning Heaven is also missing. Oh, right. This one hasn't released my communication magic tool yet. Jiyuzhen smiled and waved his hand. Why don't you try releasing that magic tool? Yes. Xin Xin flipped her hand and threw the rhombus-shaped magic tool into the air. Puff. Xin Xin spat out a mouthful of true qi on it, and the rhombus-shaped magic tool slowly melted into a pool of green water. The green water flickered with light and was about to condense into the shape of a sharp arrow. However, before the arrow could condense, puff 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 puff. With a series of chaotic sounds, the green water turned into hundreds of bubbles. Oh! Xin Xin raised her eyebrows in astonishment. Then, puff 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 puff. The hundreds of bubbles burst one after another and the green water disappeared into thin air. Venerable Overturning Heaven actually died. Xin Xin's expression changed greatly. That's strange. Jiyuzhen's brows furrowed. The changes in the 4 extreme mountains were obviously caused by Daoist cultivators. Venerable Overturning Heaven was a Daoist disciple with 4th grade essence force. How could they be so ruthless? Daoist disciples are always scheming against each other. Who knows what they're thinking? Perhaps venerable overturning heaven wasn't very sociable and was ostracized by the Daoist disciples. Then, they killed him. Shin Shin's expression slowly returned to normal as she said faintly. However, Jiyuzhen didn't agree and shook his head slightly. Nu Tanyu's thinking is too simple. Although it was an internal conflict between Daoist disciples, for a 4th grade Essence Force cultivator to be killed so easily, his opponent must be a 4th grade Essence Force cultivator or even higher. Since when did Western Paradise have such a powerful Daoist cultivator? He, Shin Shin smiled faintly, this isn't the hidden immortal continent. There aren't any unfamiliar Daoist experts here. Even if this Daoist expert was a 9th grade Essence Force cultivator, what does it have to do with me? Jiyuzhen's figure was huge, taller than ordinary people by more than half. His hands that were exposed outside of his monk robe were like palm leaf fans, and the demon-subduing pestle in his hand was several times larger than usual. His bell-like eyes swept across Shin Shin, but she couldn't see his expression. However, Shin Shin's body trembled slightly and she hurriedly lowered her head as if she was frightened. After that, Jiyuzhen paid no further attention to Shin Shin and flew to the center of the 4 extreme mountains. The purple-furred who also shook its head and followed behind, completely ignoring the azure lion and the strange bird. Roar! Seeing the center of the 4 extreme mountains, the purple fur who let out a loud roar that shook the surroundings. Jiyuzhen waved his hand and placed the thick demon-subduing pestle on the purple fur whose back. Roar! The roar was even louder than the purple fur whose. Jiyuzhen's roar was very powerful. Wherever the sound wave passed, Shin Shin's true chi swirled around her body and strands of golden clouds emerged from her palace dress. The clouds slightly overflowed in the sound wave and protected Shin Shin. Shin Shin frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "This is the Buddhist lion's roar. Grandmaster Jiyuzhen, is this a warning?" Grandmaster Jiyuzhen seems to be using some Buddhist divine ability. The power of this divine ability should be very strong. Ci Hui's face was still filled with respect as she answered in a low voice, "This lion's roar is a warning to the Daoist cultivators who might be hiding nearby to quickly show themselves if they don't have any evil intentions. Should we leave for a moment?" Xiao Hua looked at Jiyuzhen in the distance with interest and asked with a smile. As soon as Jiyuzhen appeared, Xiao Hua immediately greeted him. Unfortunately, Jiyuzhen showed no interest in this little monk and didn't say a word to Xiao Hua. Ci Hui nodded. Grandmaster Jiyuzhen's warning is naturally a warning to us. Let's leave this place first. With that, Ci Hui stepped onto the indigo lion. The indigo lion didn't back down and let out a roar. Then, it waved its tail and flew out of the 4 extreme mountains with Ci Hui. Shin Shin got on the strange bird and Xiao Hua also stepped onto an auspicious cloud and slowly flew out. Woo! As soon as the 3 of them flew out of the mountain, the Buddhist light in the 4 extreme mountains shone brightly. Jiyuzhen's body grew bigger and bigger. Then, a Dharma body comparable to the mighty Vajra emerged from Jiyuzhen's body. Roar! At this moment, the purple-haired who let out a loud roar and flew a few hundred feet away from the Dharma body. Then, he opened his mouth and a fist-sized arms bowl flashed with faint Buddhist light and rushed into the air. Seeing the arms bowl slowly fly to the front of Jiyuzhen's Dharma body, the Dharma body's giant hand also slowly waved. Chants sounded from the giant hand and a Buddhist seal flashing with brilliant Buddhist light gradually took shape between the Dharma body's hands. Vajra Buddha seal? Ci Hui raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in a low voice. Grandmaster Jiyuzhen is a Buddhist Dharma protector. He, Grandmaster Jiyuzhen holds a demon-subduing pestle and has a tall and sturdy figure. If he's not a Buddhist Dharma protector, then what is he? Shin Shin smiled. However, Grandmaster Jiyuzhen's Vajra Buddha Dharma body is actually so powerful. This is beyond my expectations. Amitabha. As a Dharma protector, one's heart has sunk into oblivion. This life of cultivation can't be brought into the cycle of reincarnation. It can be considered a life of illusion. Buddhist Dharma protectors have always been respected. Grandmaster Jiyuzhen is willing to sacrifice himself for others. This little monk truly admires you. Ci Hui couldn't help but sigh. Jiyuzhen activated his willpower and struck the alms bowl with Vajra Buddha seals. The alms bowl grew larger and the chants became louder and more hurried. It was as if thousands of Buddhas were chanting at the same time on the Four Extremities Mountain. Withdraw. When the alms bowl grew to over 100 feet in size, Jiyuzhen's Dharma body raised his hand as if he was stretching. He grabbed the alms bowl and exerted force with his arms. The alms bowl slowly flipped over in the air with its mouth facing downward. Jiyuzhen's hands left the alms bowl and formed another Buddhist seal. As the seal fell, the alms bowl flashed with Buddhist light as if it was breathing. Then, a faint golden Buddhist light rushed out of the alms bowl and landed on a huge lake in the shape of a fan. The lake was rippling with blue waves, but when the blue water touched the Buddhist light, it immediately flew out of the lake. The alms bowl sucked the water in the lake in like a dragon drinking water. Xiao Hua saw that there were other places covered by Buddhist light in the deep pool, and the water was being sucked away at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was puzzled and blurted out, "Senior Marshal Brother C.I. Hui, this old monk. Oh, that's not right. What is Grandmaster Jiyuzhen doing? Of course he's absorbing water." Shin smiled. "I'm not old yet. Can't I see it?" 12. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.